My dad skipped my wedding to go fishing with his buddies. I stood in the church vestibule in my white dress waiting for an hour until he texted me 2 words. Good luck. For 6 years, he treated me like a ghost because I refused to marry the man he chose. But yesterday, when my hotel chain was valued at $780 million on the news, his name suddenly popped up on my phone screen. Family dinner tonight. 7 p.m. Urgent. I went to that dinner, but I did not bring an appetite. I brought the receipts, the bank statements, and a reality check that was about to shatter his fragile ego into a million pieces. Before I tell you how I destroyed my toxic family in less than 2 hours, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe if you have ever had relatives who only loved you when they smelled money. I was sitting at the head of a mahogany table in a glass-walled conference room, 40 floors above the streets of Chicago. My board of directors was discussing our quarterly expansion into Dubai. My company, the Onyx Collection, had just hit a record valuation, and I was feeling on top of the world. I was Zoe Washington, the unstoppable CEO. But when my phone buzzed against the hard surface, one glance at the screen turned me back into the little girl begging for approval. Daddy. That is what the contact name said. It had been silenced for years. The message was short and commanded authority. Lumiere Restaurant, 7 p.m. Don't be late. Important family matter. My throat went tight. The last time I invited him somewhere was my wedding day. I remembered the humiliation of walking down that aisle alone while whispers rippled through the pews. He had chosen a fishing trip over giving away his only daughter because he thought my husband Dante was a loser. I looked at the board members and closed my laptop. Meeting adjourned. I needed to see what he wanted. But I was not going as the CEO. I was going to test them. I left my Porsche in the company garage and drove my old dented Honda Civic, the one I kept for errands, just to remind myself where I came from. Pulling up to the Lumiere, the valet rushed over. He recognized me immediately because I own the hotel this restaurant is inside of. I put a finger to my lips, shushing him before he could greet me by title. Just park it round back, Thomas, I whispered. He nodded, understanding the assignment instantly. As I walked toward the entrance, Tiffany, my sister-in-law, was already waiting. She was a petite woman with a sharp nose and a smile that never reached her cold, calculating eyes. She looked at my car and then at my outfit. I was wearing a simple black turtleneck and slacks, no logos. To her, I looked poor. To anyone with taste, I looked like quiet luxury. Oh, Zoe, she sighed, rolling her eyes loud enough for the doorman to hear. Did you really park that scrap metal out front? We are trying to have a classy evening. I hope the valet has a tetanus shot. I ignored her passive-aggressive jab and walked inside. My father Marcus and my younger brother Trey were already seated at the best table by the window. It was a table I knew was reserved for VIPs, usually held for celebrities or politicians. My father did not stand up. He did not hug me. He did not ask how I had been for the last 6 years. He just tapped his gold watch. 3 minutes late, Zoe. You always were undisciplined. That is why you never amounted to anything. I swallowed the rage rising in my chest and went to pull out the empty chair next to him. Stop, he barked, causing a few nearby diners to look over. I froze my hand, hovering over the chair back. He pointed to Tiffany's Louis Vuitton bag sitting on the cushioned seat. Do not move that. The leather scratches easily. That bag is worth more than your entire wardrobe. Go grab a folding chair from the corner if you want to sit. I looked at Trey, expecting my brother to say something to defend me. Instead, he just smirked and took a sip of water, avoiding my eyes. He was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong even though he had never held a steady job in his life. A waiter approached the table. I recognized him immediately. It was Julian, one of my best shift managers. His eyes went wide when he saw me standing there, being treated like unwanted furniture. He opened his mouth to say, "Good evening, Madame CEO," but I narrowed my eyes, giving him a tiny, almost imperceptible shake of my head. "Play along," I mouthed. My father snapped his fingers at Julian, effectively cutting off the moment. Hey boy, get her a water, tap water. She is not drinking the sparkling stuff on my tab. And bring us the wine list, the expensive one. Julian stiffened his jaw tight, but he bowed his head professionally. Yes, sir. As I dragged a heavy wooden chair from a nearby empty table, creating a loud scraping sound against the floor, I looked at my father. He looked like a king holding court, puffing out his chest. He had absolutely no idea he was sitting in my castle, and the ground beneath his feet was about to crumble. The heavy leather-bound menu felt cool against my fingertips. It was a tactile detail I had personally selected 3 months ago when we redesigned the branding for Lumiere. I knew every font choice, every pricing strategy, and every ingredient listed on these cream-colored pages. But as I opened it to browse the appetizers, my father cleared his throat, a sound that used to make my stomach drop in childhood. I see they have the Osetra caviar here, Trey announced loudly, leaning back in his chair like he owned the building. His suit was a little too shiny and his watch was a knockoff I could spot from across the room, but he wore his arrogance like a second skin. He snapped his fingers at Julian, who was standing patiently by the table with a notepad. Boy, bring us the 50-gram tin and make sure the blinis are hot. We are celebrating tonight, so do not be stingy with the creme fraiche. I watched Julian jaw tighten. He was a sommelier with a master's degree in hospitality, not a servant to be snapped at. But he caught my eye briefly, and I gave him a tiny, almost invisible nod. He wrote down the order. That tin of caviar was $500. I knew for a fact Trey did not have $500. His credit score was probably lower than the temperature outside in the Chicago winter. I turned my attention to the entrees. I had been working since 4 in the morning reviewing quarterly reports, and I was starving. The dry-aged ribeye caught my eye. It was our signature dish. I think I will have the ribeye, I said softly, running my finger over the text. The menu was suddenly ripped from my hands. My father held it away from me, his face twisted in a scowl that he reserved exclusively for me. You will not have the ribeye, Zoe. Look at the price. $80 for a piece of meat. You are out of your mind. I stared at him, keeping my voice steady. I am hungry, Dad, and I can pay for my own meal. Oh, you can pay. Marcus laughed, a harsh barking sound that drew eyes from the neighboring tables. With what money? The unemployment checks you are probably collecting. I heard about that little startup you were working for going under. What was it, selling handmade soap or something equally useless? It was a tech consulting firm, and I sold it for 6 figures to start my first hotel. But I did not say that. I just sat there letting him rewrite my history as he always did. You are not working, Zoe. My father continued, tossing the menu back at Julian. I am paying for this dinner because, unlike you, your brother actually has a future. And because I am paying, I decide what you eat. We do not waste capital on charity cases. He pointed a thick finger at the bottom of the page. She will have the garden green salad, dressing on the side, and bring her more tap water. The garden green salad was $15. It was essentially a bowl of lettuce and 3 cherry tomatoes. It was what people ordered when they were not hungry or when they were being punished. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, not from shame, but from pure, unadulterated rage. I owned the slaughterhouse that provided the beef. I owned the logistics company that delivered the vegetables. I signed the checks for the chef who designed the menu. And here I was being told I was too poor to eat anything but leaves. Tiffany chimed in, then her voice dripping with that fake sugary sweetness that made my skin crawl. She reached across the table and patted my hand, her perfectly manicured nails digging slightly into my skin. Oh, do not look so upset, Zoe. Marcus is just looking out for you. Besides, I was reading an article the other day in my wellness magazine. It said that women from your community are genetically predisposed to high blood pressure and diabetes. She paused, taking a sip of her wine, letting the microaggression hang in the air like a foul smell. Really, I asked, my tone flat. My community. You know African American women, Tiffany whispered, as if saying the race out loud was a dirty word. You all have to be so careful with your hearts. The heavy foods, the grease, it is a cultural problem, really. So the salad is actually a blessing. Think of it as a detox. You look like you could use one. She smiled at me, a wide, toothy grin that was meant to look encouraging, but looked more like a shark baring its teeth. She was sitting there eating bread and butter, lecturing me about health, while putting me in a box based on stereotypes. It was the kind of racism that was wrapped in concern, the kind that was hard to call out without looking like the angry black woman she already expected me to be. I pulled my hand away from hers slowly. Thank you for the medical advice, Tiffany. I did not know your degree in fashion marketing covered cardiology. Her smile faltered for a second, but my father slammed his hand on the table. Watch your tone, Zoe. Tiffany is family. She is trying to help you. You should be grateful someone cares about your health because Lord knows you are not getting any younger or any thinner. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of expensive perfume and roasted garlic that filled the restaurant. I reached under the table for my phone. I needed to end this farce, but the timing had to be perfect. I unlocked the screen and opened my message thread with Mr. Henderson, the general manager of the hotel. I typed quickly, my thumb flying over the glass screen while keeping my face completely neutral. Message to Henderson. Do not intervene. Let them order whatever they want. Let them run up the bill. Give them the show. I will handle the check at the end. I hit send and slid the phone back into my pocket just as Julian returned with the caviar. He placed the silver tin on a bed of crushed ice in the center of the table. Trey clapped his hands together like a toddler getting a birthday cake. Look at that presentation. That is what success looks like, Zoe. Take a picture, maybe you can use it for your vision board or whatever it is you dreamers do. He spooned a massive mound of black eggs onto a blini and shoved it into his mouth, chewing with his mouth open. My father raised his wine glass. The deep red liquid swirled against the crystal. He looked at Trey with a look of adoration I had starved for my entire childhood. To Trey, he announced, his voice booming, to the new real estate venture. I always knew you were the one who would carry the Washington name to greatness. While others, he glanced at me with disdain, abandon the family to pursue selfish nonsense. You stayed. You built something. You are going to make us millions, son. I watched them clink glasses. The sound of the crystal ringing was sharp and clear. To millions, Trey said, his mouth still full. To family, Tiffany added, smirking at me over the rim of her glass. I picked up my glass of tap water. The ice had melted. I raised it silently in a mock toast. Yes, to millions, I thought, and to the reality check that is coming for you all. Julian placed the bowl of plain lettuce in front of me. I picked up my fork and stabbed a cherry tomato, imagining it was my brother's inflated ego. The show had just begun, and the most expensive lesson of their lives was about to be served. The waiter had barely walked away when the air at the table shifted. The jovial mood my father had feigned for the toast evaporated instantly, replaced by the cold, hard stare of a business negotiation. He reached into his leather briefcase, which he had kept by his feet, and pulled out a thick manila envelope. He did not hand it to me gently. He tossed it onto the pristine white tablecloth where it slid across the surface and stopped right next to my bowl of wilted lettuce. Open it, Marcus commanded. I wiped my hands on the napkin and slowly undid the clasp. I already knew what it was before I saw the legal header. I could smell the betrayal coming off the paper. It was a quitclaim deed. A document transferring full ownership of a property from one person to another. Specifically, it was for the brownstone on 42nd Street. Grandma's house. The house was the only thing my grandmother had left me. She had bypassed my father, knowing his gambling habits, and bypassed Trey, knowing his laziness. She left it to me because I was the only one who visited her on Sundays, who mowed her lawn, and who sat by her bedside when the cancer took her. It was not just a house. It was my sanctuary. It was the only place in this city where I had ever felt safe. I looked up from the document, my heart pounding against my ribs. You want me to sign over Grandma's house? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. To him. I gestured to Trey, who was currently busy picking caviar out of his teeth with a toothpick. Dad nodded as if this was the most logical request in the world. It is a leverage play, Zoe. You would not understand, because you have never played in the big leagues. Trey has an opportunity, a once-in-a-lifetime investment deal that requires immediate liquidity. We need collateral to secure the loan, and that dusty old house is just sitting there gathering cobwebs. It is dead capital. Trey is going to bring it to life. I felt a laugh bubbling up in my throat, a hysterical sound that I had to bite my cheek to suppress. That dusty old house was currently valued at $3.2 million because the neighborhood had gentrified, but of course they did not know that. They thought it was still the rundown shack from the 90s. And what exactly is this investment? I asked, looking directly at Trey. If I'm giving up my inheritance, I think I deserve to know where the money is going. Trey dropped the toothpick and sat up straighter, adjusting his lapels. He looked at Tiffany, who gave him an encouraging nod, like a mother watching her toddler recite the alphabet. It is hospitality, Zoe, Trey said, using a tone one might use to explain quantum physics to a golden retriever. High-end luxury hospitality. I have a contact, a very high-level broker, who is getting me in on the ground floor of a major expansion. We are buying into a hotel chain that is about to go public. It is called the Onyx Collection. I froze. My fork hovered halfway to my mouth. I had to use every ounce of self-control I possessed not to choke on my water. The Onyx Collection. My company. The company I founded. The company where I currently sat as the majority shareholder and CEO. He wanted to sell my own house to invest in my own company through a broker I had definitely never met. I slowly set my fork down. The Onyx Collection. I repeated, keeping my face completely blank. You are investing in Onyx. Trey smirked, mistaking my shock for awe. Yeah. You have heard of it? Of course you have. It is all over the news. They are taking over the market. My guy says the CEO is looking for silent partners to inject capital before the IPO. It is exclusive. VIP only. You need a minimum buy-in of $5 million. The bank will give us the loan against the house and some other assets Dad put up. We triple our money in 6 months, Zoe. Triple. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. This was fascinating. It was like watching a man try to sell ice to a polar bear while claiming he invented winter. Tell me, Trey, I said, channeling the voice I used in boardroom inquisitions. Who is this broker? And more importantly, who is the CEO of Onyx? If you are investing $5 million, surely you have met the leadership team. You have done your due diligence right. Trey waved his hand dismissively. Details, details. The broker is a guy named Chad. He runs a boutique firm downtown. And the CEO, well, obviously it is some reclusive billionaire. My guy says he is based in Dubai. Old money. Very private. That is why they need people like me. People with vision to handle the American expansion. I stared at him. He thought the CEO was a man in Dubai. He had absolutely no idea that the CEO was a black woman sitting 3 feet away from him wearing a turtleneck from Target. And let me guess, I continued pressing him. This Chad requires a wire transfer to an offshore account to secure your spot on the list. Trey blinked. How did you know that? Yeah, it is for tax purposes. It is standard procedure in high finance, Zoe. Not that you would know anything about that. I looked at my father. He was watching Trey with a look of pure, unadulterated pride. He truly believed this. He believed his son was a business mogul making power moves. He could not see that his son was being taken for a ride by a common scammer, using my company's name as bait. Dad, I said, turning to him, this is a scam. There is no silent partner program at Onyx. They are not looking for outside capital from individual investors, and the CEO is definitely not a man in Dubai. Marcus slammed his fist on the table, causing the silverware to rattle. Enough, Zoe. His face turned a shade of purple I had not seen in years. You are jealous. That is all this is. You cannot stand the fact that your brother has the courage to take risks, while you are scared of your own shadow. You are trying to sabotage him because you are bitter about your own failures. I am trying to save you from losing everything, I argued, my voice rising slightly. If you sign that loan, if you give that money to this Chad, you will never see it again. Trey does not know what he is talking about. Ask him the revenue per available room. Ask him the occupancy rate of their Chicago location. Ask him anything real. Tiffany scoffed loudly. Oh, listen to her. She reads one article on Wall Street Journal and thinks she is Warren Buffett. Zoe, honey, stay in your lane. Trey has been having meetings for weeks. He knows what he is doing. Just sign the paper and stop being so dramatic. You should be happy to help the family. After all, it is not like you are doing anything productive with that house. Trey leaned forward, a cruel glint in his eyes. You know Dad is right, he said. You are just mad because Grandma left it to you out of pity. She knew you would never find a husband who could provide for you, so she gave you a roof over your head. But now that you are married to that construction worker, I guess you do not need it anymore. Or maybe you do. Is he even working these days? I felt the anger burn hot in my chest, but it was a cold, focused anger now. They were insulting my husband. They were insulting my intelligence. And they were trying to steal the last piece of my grandmother's love. I looked down at the document. The lines of legal text blurred slightly. If I signed this, they would lose the house. They would lose the money. They would be ruined. Part of me, the vindictive part, wanted to let them do it, wanted to let them drive off the cliff they were speeding toward. But the house, Grandma's house, I could not let them take that. I am not signing it, I said firmly, pushing the paper back across the table. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus looked at me as if I had just spoken in a foreign language. Excuse me, he said, his voice dangerously low. I said no, I repeated. The house is mine. Grandma left it to me. I am not risking it on a Ponzi scheme. If Trey wants to invest, he can use his own money. Or maybe he can sell that fake watch he is wearing. Trey gasped, clutching his wrist. It is a Rolex, you ignorant. Marcus stood up. He did not care about the other diners anymore. He loomed over me, his shadow casting a dark pall over the table. You ungrateful little brat. I gave you life. I put food on your table for 18 years. And this is how you repay me. By holding back your brother. By standing in the way of this family's success. He pointed a shaking finger at my face. You will sign that paper, Zoe. Or so help me God, you will regret it. You think you are safe because you are married now. You think you do not need us. But mark my words, when you come crawling back, when that husband of yours leaves you for someone better, and I will not be there. This door will be closed. I looked up at him into the eyes of the man who was supposed to be my hero. I saw nothing there but greed and a bruised ego. Sit down, Dad, I said calmly, grabbing my water glass. You are making a scene, and the answer is still no. Tiffany whispered something in Trey's ear. Trey nodded slowly, a malicious smile spreading across his face. Fine, he said, leaning back. Don't sign it. We don't need the house that badly. Dad has other assets. But just remember, Zoe, when we are cutting the ribbon at the grand opening of the new Onyx Tower, and I am standing there on the podium next to the CEO, you will be watching from the sidewalk. I almost choked on my laughter again. The image of Trey standing next to me on a podium was indeed hilarious, but not for the reasons he thought. I picked up my fork and stabbed a single wilting lettuce leaf. I look forward to that day, Trey, I said dryly. I really do. Marcus sat back down, straightening his tie, breathing heavily. He snatched the papers off the table and shoved them back into his bag. We will discuss this later, he hissed. When you have come to your senses, now eat your salad. We have more important things to discuss. He turned to Trey, his face instantly softening into a smile. Tell me more about the launch party, son. Will there be press? I watched them ignoring me again, descending back into their fantasy world. They were so confident, so sure of their superiority. They had no clue that the person they needed to impress, the person holding the keys to the kingdom they so desperately wanted to enter, was sitting right there, eating a $15 salad and plotting their absolute destruction. You talk about family duty and sacrifice, Dad, but those words sound strange coming from your mouth. The manila envelope sat between us on the table like a drawn battle line. Marcus was breathing hard, his nostrils flaring as he processed my refusal. He was not used to being told no, especially not by me. In his mind, I was still the quiet, obedient girl who sat in the corner while he and Trey played the main characters in the Washington family drama. But that girl died 6 years ago in the vestibule of a church, and the woman sitting before him now had no patience for his revisionist history. Ungrateful, Marcus spat the word out like it tasted like poison. That is what you are, Zoe. Ungrateful. I raised you. I paid for your braces. I put a roof over your head. And the moment you get a little bit of freedom, you turn your back on us. You are willing to let your brother fail just to spite me. It is sick. He looked around the table seeking validation. Trey was shaking his head, looking at me with disgusted pity, while Tiffany sipped her wine, watching the show with glinting eyes. You are a disappointment, Marcus continued, his voice rising. A father expects his children to build on his legacy. Trey understands that. Trey is out here hustling, trying to elevate our name. And you are hoarding a dead woman's house like a miser. You are selfish, Zoe. You have always been selfish. The accusation hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Selfish. The word triggered a memory so sharp it felt like a physical blow. I remembered the nights I spent tutoring Trey because Dad was too busy networking. I remembered the weekends I spent cleaning the house while they went to ball games. But most of all, I remembered a specific date. June 12th. I placed my hands flat on the table, feeling the cool smoothness of the tablecloth. I kept my voice terrifyingly calm. I am selfish, I repeated slowly. That is an interesting perspective, Dad. Let us talk about selfishness. Let us talk about my wedding day. Marcus waved his hand dismissively. Oh, get over it. That was years ago. Why do you always have to dwell on the past? Because it matters, I said, my voice hardening. It matters because on the most important day of my life, I stood in the back of St. Jude's Cathedral in a white dress waiting for my father to walk me down the aisle. The ceremony was supposed to start at 2 o'clock. Do you remember where you were at 2 o'clock, Dad? He looked away, grabbing his wine glass. I told you I had a business emergency. A deal was falling through. I had to handle it. I did it for the family. Liar, I whispered. The word cracked through the tension. I waited for you, I continued, my eyes locked on his face. I stood there for 45 minutes, telling the organist to keep playing prelude music. The guests were whispering. My husband was standing at the altar, sweating, thinking I had left him. And then at 2:45, I finally got a text message from you. I pulled my phone out not to show him, but to hold it like a piece of evidence. Do you remember what it said? Because I saved it. I have it screenshotted. It did not say, sorry honey, emergency meeting. It did not say, I love you, but I cannot make it. I leaned forward, lowering my voice so only they could hear. It said, good luck, gone fishing. And then 5 minutes later, you accidentally posted a photo on Facebook of you and your buddies holding up a striped bass on a boat in Lake Michigan. You were smiling brighter in that photo than I have ever seen you smile at me. Marcus turned a shade of gray. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. You skipped your only daughter's wedding to go fishing, I said, letting the absurdity of it sink in. You chose a fish over walking me down the aisle. You chose a cooler of beer over giving me away. And you have the audacity to sit here in my face and call me selfish. You stood me up, Dad. You humiliated me in front of 200 people. Tiffany let out a short, cruel laugh. She swirled her Chardonnay, looking at me with that pitying expression she perfected. Oh, honestly, Zoe, she said, putting her hand on Marcus's arm as if to comfort him. You are blowing this way out of proportion. Marcus has a reputation to uphold. You have to understand his position. I looked at her, baffled. His position. His position was being my father. Tiffany continued, her voice dripping with condescension. Look, let us be real for a second. You are marrying Dante, a construction worker, a man who wears work boots and smells like drywall. Do you have any idea how embarrassing that is for a family of this stature? Marcus Washington is a respected figure in the community. He could not be seen giving his daughter away to a laborer. It would have signaled that he approved of the match. He was just protecting the family brand. My blood ran cold. They did not just think Dante was unworthy. They were ashamed of him. They thought because he worked with his hands he was beneath them. They had no idea that Dante was the lead architect who designed the very building we were sitting in. They had no idea that the work boots they despised had walked on the foundations of skyscrapers in Tokyo and Dubai. So let me get this straight, I said, turning my gaze to Tiffany. My father abandoned me at the altar because he was afraid his golf buddies would judge him for having a son-in-law who works for a living. It is about class, Tiffany said, shrugging. Birds of a feather flock together. You chose to fly low. You cannot blame Marcus for wanting to stay high. I looked back at my father, waiting for him to correct her, waiting for him to say, no, that is not it. I really did have an emergency, but he stayed silent. He just sat there looking justified. He agreed with her. He thought my husband was trash, so he treated me like trash. I felt a sting of tears, but I forced them back. I would not cry for them. Not anymore. You know what I said? My voice trembling slightly with suppressed rage. I waited in that vestibule for 2 hours. 2 hours, Dad. The priest wanted to cancel. The guests started leaving. They thought I had been left at the altar, but I was not the one who got cold feet. I was the one who was forgotten. I took a deep breath, painting the picture they had refused to see. I had to ask the usher to walk me down the aisle. Old Mr. Jenkins. He was 80 years old and walked with a cane. He held my arm because my father was too busy catching a bass. And when I got to the front, when I finally looked at Dante, I saw the hurt in his eyes. Not because you were not there, but because he saw how much your absence broke me. I picked up the quitclaim deed, the document that would give them everything they wanted, and I ripped it in half. The sound of tearing paper was loud and final. You did not walk me down the aisle then, I said, dropping the torn pieces onto his empty plate. So you do not get to walk into my life now and demand favors. You lost your rights as a father the moment you cast that line into the water. Marcus stared at the torn paper, his face contorting into a mask of pure fury. You will regret that, he whispered. But I was already done. I had said my piece. And little did they know the husband they had just mocked, the man they thought was a lowly laborer, was about to walk through those doors and bring the entire ceiling crashing down on their heads. The past was a wound, but tonight it was going to be a weapon. And I was just getting started. Trey laughed, a sound that grated against my nerves like sandpaper on glass. He reached out and picked up one of the torn halves of the quitclaim deed, twirling it between his fingers, as if my pain was nothing more than a cheap parlor trick. You are such a drama queen, Zoe, he said, shaking his head. You bring up a wedding that happened 6 years ago like it is the Kennedy assassination. Get over it. Dad was busy. Men have business. But you love playing the victim, don't you? It is your favorite role. Just like that time you were in the hospital. You acted like you were on your deathbed just to get attention. My blood ran cold. The temperature in the restaurant seemed to drop 10 degrees. I looked at my brother, who was currently wiping caviar grease off his lip, and I wondered how we shared the same DNA. I stared at him, my voice barely a whisper. I had a tumor, Trey. A benign tumor the size of a golf ball pressing against my spine. The doctors told me there was a 20% chance of paralysis. They told me I might not walk again. Trey waved his fork dismissively. Yeah, but you are fine now, aren't you? You are walking. You are talking. You are sitting here annoying us. So clearly it wasn't that big of a deal. But you called Dad crying like a baby. You wanted him to drop everything and come hold your hand. I turned my gaze to Marcus. My father was avoiding my eyes, focusing intently on cutting his steak. The knife scraped against the porcelain plate, a harsh screeching sound that echoed the scream trapped in my throat. I called you Dad, I said, my voice trembling with the memory of that sterile white room. I called you 3 times. It was 5 in the morning. I was being wheeled into surgery. I was terrified. I just wanted to hear your voice. I wanted my father to tell me it was going to be okay. Marcus chewed slowly, taking his time before swallowing. He took a sip of wine and dabbed his mouth with the linen napkin. I received the voicemails, Zoe, he said calmly. But I was handling a crisis. A family crisis. I felt a bitter laugh bubble up in my chest. A crisis. I was lying on a gurney with an IV in my arm, signing consent forms that said I might die on the operating table. And you had a crisis. What was it this time, Dad? Did the cable go out? Did you run out of scotch? Marcus slammed his fork down. Do not be disrespectful. Your brother was in trouble. I looked at Trey. He smirked, looking down at his plate like a cat that had just eaten the canary. Tell her, Dad, Trey said, goading him on. Tell her why you couldn't come hold her hand. Marcus sighed, looking at me with a mixture of annoyance and pity. Trey had an accident. He called me in a panic. He was on the side of the road on the expressway. He was shaking. He needed me. My heart stopped. An accident. For a split second, I felt a pang of guilt. If Trey had been hurt, if he had been in danger, then maybe I could understand. Maybe any father would choose the child in immediate physical peril. Was he hurt? I asked. Was he bleeding? Did he have to go to the hospital too? Tiffany let out a small giggle, covering her mouth with her hand. Marcus cleared his throat. He was shaken up, Zoe. Emotional trauma is real. He had scratched the bumper of his BMW against a guardrail. It was a leasing issue. He was afraid the insurance premiums would skyrocket if he reported it. He needed me to come down there and talk to the other driver to settle it with cash so it wouldn't go on his record. I stared at him. The sounds of the restaurant faded away. The clinking of glasses, the low hum of conversation, the jazz music playing softly in the background, all of it vanished. All I could hear was the rushing of blood in my ears. You missed my spinal surgery, I said slowly, emphasizing every syllable to negotiate a cash settlement for a scratched bumper. It was a brand new 5 Series, Zoe, Marcus said defensively. Do you know how much the depreciation is on a luxury vehicle if it has an accident report? Trey was hysterical. He could not handle that kind of pressure. He needed his father to step in and fix it. He needed you to fix a scratch on a car. I whispered, tears finally stinging my eyes, not from sadness, but from the sheer absurdity of it. And I needed you to be there in case I never woke up. Marcus leaned forward, his face hardening into that familiar mask of patriarchal authority. He pointed his steak knife at me. Listen to me closely, Zoe, because I am only going to say this once. You are the oldest. You have always been strong. You are like your mother was, sturdy, resilient, capable of handling pain. You do not need coddling. When you fall down, you get back up. That is your job. He gestured to Trey, who was now busy texting on his phone, completely unbothered by the conversation. But Trey, Marcus continued, his voice softening into something resembling reverence. Trey is the son. He carries the Washington name. He is the future of this lineage. Men have a different burden, Zoe. The world is harder on them. They have to lead, they have to provide, they have to be kings. And sometimes kings need protection. They need a safety net. It is my duty as a father to ensure his path is smooth so he can rise to his potential. I felt like I had been slapped. The misogyny was so casual, so ingrained in his worldview, that he did not even realize how monstrous he sounded. So because I am a woman, I am disposable, I asked, my voice shaking. Because I do not carry the name, I am just a mule to be worked until I break. And he, because he was born a boy, gets to be a pampered prince who calls daddy when he scratches his toy. It is not about being disposable, Marcus said, irritated by my refusal to accept his logic. It is about roles. Everyone in a family has a role. Your role is to be independent, to not be a burden, to support the legacy, not drain resources from it. When you called me from that hospital, crying like a frightened child, you were failing in your role. You were being weak. And I do not tolerate weakness, especially not when my son needed me to be strong for him. I looked at Tiffany. She was nodding in agreement, sipping her wine. It is true, Zoe, she chimed in. Men just process stress differently. Trey is very sensitive. He could not have handled that insurance adjuster alone. You are used to handling things. It is a compliment, really. Marcus trusts you to survive on your own. He has to help Trey because Trey is, well, he has more to lose. I looked down at my hands. The hands that had built a $780 million empire. The hands that had signed contracts that made grown men tremble. The hands that Dante had held tight while I lay in that hospital bed waking up from anesthesia, asking for a father who never came. I remembered Dante's face that day. He had sat in the uncomfortable plastic chair for 14 hours straight. He had fed me ice chips. He had helped me walk to the bathroom when my legs felt like lead. He had been the man Marcus pretended to be. You are right, Dad, I said quietly, lifting my head. I am strong. I am incredibly strong. I survived that surgery. I learned to walk again. And do you know who helped me? It wasn't you. It wasn't Trey. It was the man you refused to let walk me down the aisle. I picked up my napkin and placed it on the table, smoothing out the wrinkles. You talk about roles, I said, my voice growing steadier with every word. You talk about legacy. You think legacy is a name on a leasing agreement for a BMW. You think legacy is protecting your son from the consequences of his own mediocrity? You are wrong. Legacy is who shows up when the building is burning. Legacy is who holds your hand when the lights go out. I looked him dead in the eye. I gave you a chance tonight, Marcus. I invited you here because despite everything, despite the wedding, despite the hospital, despite the years of silence, a small, stupid part of me wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, you had changed. I wanted to see if you could be a father to me for just one meal. I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. But you just proved to me that you are not a father. You are just a bank manager for Trey's failures. And I am done making deposits. Marcus scoffed, rolling his eyes. Oh, spare me the dramatic exit speech. You are not going anywhere. You are going to finish that salad, and then we are going to talk about how you are going to help your brother get that meeting with the Onyx CEO. Because whether you like it or not, you are a Washington, and Washingtons help each other. I stared at him, marveling at his delusion. He really thought he still held the leash. He really thought he could whip me with insults and then command me to perform. I am not a Washington anymore, I said softly. I am a ghost. The ghost of the daughter you neglected. And ghosts? Dad, they tend to haunt the people who killed them. Trey laughed again, his mouth full of bread. You are so weird, Zoe. Seriously, are you on medication? I did not answer him. I just checked my watch. Dante would be here any minute. And when he walked through those doors, the ground was going to shift beneath their feet. The time for talking was over. The time for reckoning had arrived. You said this was my last chance to help the family, Marcus sneered. Well, you blew it. So stop whining and make yourself useful. Pass me the salt. I looked at the salt shaker sitting inches from my hand. I looked at my father's expectant face. No, I said. Marcus blinked. What did you say? I said no, I repeated. Get it yourself. You are the king, right? Kings do not need help from independent women. Marcus turned red, his jaw clenching. He looked ready to explode, ready to unleash a torrent of verbal abuse that would have cowed the old Zoe into submission. But before he could speak, a shadow fell over the table. A tall, broad-shouldered shadow that smelled of cedar wood and expensive cologne, mixed with the faint, honest scent of sawdust. I looked up and saw Dante standing there. He was not wearing a tuxedo. He was wearing his work boots and a charcoal gray architect's coat. He looked tired, but when he looked at me, his eyes were filled with a fierce, protective warmth that made me want to cry. Marcus looked up and sneered. Well, look who it is. The help has arrived. Dante did not look at Marcus. He looked only at me. Are you okay, Zoe? He asked, his voice deep and steady. I smiled for the first time that night. I am now, I said. And just like that, the balance of power began to tip. The cavalry had arrived and he brought with him the storm. The cedar scent drifted over the table before he even spoke, cutting through the heavy aroma of truffle oil and Marcus's expensive cologne. I watched Tiffany's nose wrinkle in distaste before she even turned around. She pulled a silk handkerchief from her clutch and pressed it delicately to her nostrils, as if she had suddenly found herself in a landfill rather than a five-star dining establishment. Oh my God, she muttered behind her hand. Do you smell that? It smells like wet dog and drywall. Did they let a maintenance man in through the front door? I did not have to turn around to know who it was. My heart rate, which had been spiking with adrenaline during my confrontation with my father, suddenly steadied. It was a physical reaction I had felt every day for the last 6 years. When Dante was near, the world felt less chaotic. The ground felt solid. Dante stepped into the light of the crystal chandelier. He was a mountain of a man, broad-shouldered and tall, with a presence that seemed to suck the oxygen out of the room. He was not wearing a suit. He had come straight from the site of our newest hotel project in the West Loop. He was wearing dark, heavy canvas pants and a charcoal gray jacket that was dusted with fine white plaster powder on the sleeve. To Tiffany and Trey, he looked like a laborer who had lost his way. They could not see the red tag on the jacket that marked it as limited edition Japanese workwear worth more than Trey's entire outfit. They could not see that the boots, leaving faint, dusty prints on the carpet, were custom leather designed for architectural site safety. All they saw was dirt. Tiffany actually gasped, shrinking back in her chair as he approached. "Excuse me," she said loudly, snapping her fingers at a passing busboy. "Can you call security? There is a workman wandering around the dining room. It is unsanitary." Dante ignored her completely. He did not even blink at her insult. He walked straight to the empty space beside my chair. His eyes were dark and tired, but burning with a fierce intensity that was fixed solely on me. He looked at my shaking hands resting on the table. He looked at the unshed tears in my eyes. And then he looked at the torn pieces of the quit-claim deed on my father's plate. Marcus stood up halfway, his napkin falling to the floor. His face twisted into a mask of indignation. "I did not invite you." He spat out, his voice low and venomous. "This is a family dinner. Private. We are discussing business that does not concern you. Get out." Dante stopped. He turned his head slowly to look at my father. He did not raise his voice. He did not posture. He just looked at Marcus with a kind of calm detachment that was more terrifying than any scream. "I am not here for your dinner, Marcus," Dante said, his voice a deep rumble that vibrated in my chest. "I am here for my wife. You sent her a text saying it was an emergency. I checked the location. I saw her heart rate on her watch data sharing. I came to make sure she was safe." He reached out and grabbed the back of the empty chair next to me. The wood creaked slightly under his grip. He pulled it out with a decisive scrape against the floor and sat down. He did not ask for permission. He simply occupied the space as if it belonged to him by divine right. Trey scoffed, leaning back and crossing his arms. "Great. Now we have to smell sweat while we eat caviar. Could you at least have showered? You are embarrassing, Zoe. Look at people staring." Dante turned his gaze to Trey. "I smell like work," Dante said simply. "It is the smell of building things. I know you are unfamiliar with it." Trey's mouth snapped shut. He looked away, muttering something about blue-collar trash under his breath. Dante turned back to me. He reached out and covered my hand with his. His palm was rough, warm, and calloused. It was the hand of a man who built foundations, who understood structure, who knew how to hold things together when they were falling apart. "Are you okay?" he asked me, ignoring the 3 hostile faces staring at him. I nodded, letting out a breath I did not know I was holding. "I am okay. They want me to sign over Grandma's house for an investment scheme. Dante's eyes narrowed. He looked at the torn paper again. The house is not for sale, he said to the table at large. We are restoring it. Zoe has plans for the garden. Marcus laughed a harsh barking sound. Restoring it? With what money? Your paycheck, please. That house is a money pit. Zoe needs to liquidate it to help the family. It is her duty. And you, as her husband, should be encouraging her to support her blood relatives, not enabling her selfishness. Dante leaned forward. He rested his elbows on the table, interlacing his fingers. The plaster dust on his sleeve left a small white smudge on the pristine tablecloth. Tiffany stared at the smudge in horror. My duty, Dante said, his voice dangerously quiet, is to protect my wife from anyone who tries to exploit her. Even if that person is her father. Especially if that person is her father. Marcus's face reddened. Who do you think you are talking to, boy? I am Marcus Washington. I have done more for this community in 1 year than you will do in your entire miserable life. You drag bricks for a living. I make deals. I create wealth. You have no right to sit at this table and lecture me about duty. I watched the two of them. The contrast was stark. Marcus was wearing a $3,000 suit, but he looked small. He looked desperate. He was a man trying to project power he no longer possessed, using volume and insults to compensate for his hollowness. Dante was covered in dust, but he looked like a king. He possessed a quiet, natural authority that did not require validation. You are right, Dante said. I do not make deals like you. I do not gamble with money I do not have. I do not sell my children's future to fund my own ego. He picked up the wine list that was sitting unused on the table. He opened it casually, scanning the pages as if he were bored. And I definitely do not skip my daughter's wedding to go fishing, he added without looking up. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the clinking of silverware from other tables seemed to stop. Tiffany looked from Dante to Marcus, her eyes wide. She had not expected him to know. She had not expected him to speak. Marcus slammed his fist on the table, causing the water glasses to jump. Get out, he roared. Get out of my sight. You are ruining this night. You are poisoning my daughter against me. Zoe, tell him to leave. Tell him this is family business. I looked at my father. I looked at his shaking hands, his purple face, his bulging veins. He looked like a toddler having a tantrum. Then I looked at Dante. He was calm. He was steady. He was waiting for me, not pressuring me, just waiting. He stays, I said. Marcus looked at me as if I had slapped him. What did you say? I said he stays, I repeated louder this time. He is my family. You are my relatives. There is a difference. If he goes, I go. And if I go, you do not get to ask about the Onyx connection. Trey perked up at the mention of Onyx. He grabbed Marcus's arm. Dad, chill out. We need her. We need the meeting. Let the construction guy stay. Who cares if he smells? Just ignore him. Marcus took a deep, ragged breath. He glared at Dante with pure hatred. Fine, he hissed. He can stay. But he keeps his mouth shut. And he pays for his own food. I am not buying steak for a bricklayer. Dante smiled a small, dry smile that did not reach his eyes. Do not worry about me, Marcus, he said, closing the menu. I am not hungry. I just came to watch. Watch what Tiffany snapped. Watch us eat. That is creepy. Watch you realize, Dante said softly, exactly who you are dealing with. He leaned back in his chair, crossing his legs comfortably. He put his arm around the back of my chair, his hand resting protectively on my shoulder. His thumb traced small, soothing circles on my fabric. Proceed, he said. Continue your pitch. I am fascinated. Tell Zoe more about this amazing investment opportunity. Marcus straightened his tie, trying to regain his dignity. He cleared his throat and turned his back on Dante, focusing entirely on me. As I was saying before we were rudely interrupted, Marcus said, his voice tight. The Onyx deal is a game changer. But it requires capital. If you will not sign the house over, then we need cash. You must have savings. You have been working for 10 years. I do, I said. How much? Trey asked greedily, leaning over the table. Enough, I said. Then give it to us, Marcus demanded. Consider it a loan. A high-interest loan. We will pay you back double in 6 months. I looked at Dante. He gave me a slight nod. A signal. It was time to let the trap snap shut. I will not give you a loan, I said. But, if you are so desperate to meet the CEO of Onyx, maybe I can help with that. Trey's eyes lit up. You can. You know him. I know the executive assistant's schedule. I lied smoothly. I might be able to get you a face-to-face. Tonight. Tonight? Trey nearly shouted. Are you serious? Yes, I said. But there is a condition. What is it? Marcus asked, suspicious but intrigued. You have to pay for this dinner, I said, and you have to apologize to Dante. The table went silent again. Apologize, Marcus whispered. To him. Yes, I said. For the insults, for the wedding, for everything. You want the meeting. You pay the toll. Marcus looked at Dante. He looked at the dust on his jacket. He looked at the calm superiority in his eyes. It was a physical struggle for him. His pride was fighting a losing battle against his greed. Trey kicked him under the table. Dad, do it. It is millions of dollars. Just say sorry. Marcus grit his teeth. He took a sip of wine. He did not look at Dante. He looked at the wall behind him. I am sorry, he mumbled. I did not hear you, Dante said, putting a hand to his ear. I said, I am sorry. Marcus said louder, his voice shaking with rage. For the misunderstanding. Dante looked at him for a long moment. He did not accept the apology. He merely acknowledged the submission. Fair enough, Dante said. I turned to Trey. And you pay the bill. All of it. Trey pulled out his wallet, tapping it confidently. Done. Easy. I have 20 grand credit on this card. Let us get this meeting. I smiled. It was a cold, dangerous smile. Okay, I said. Finish your caviar. The CEO is closer than you think. Dante squeezed my shoulder. The game was entering the final round, and they had just bought tickets to their own execution. The air in the private dining alcove was thick enough to choke on. My father sat there simmering in his humiliation, picking at his napkin like he wanted to shred it into 1,000 pieces. He had apologized to a man he considered beneath him, and it was eating him alive. But Trey, being Trey, could not stand the silence. He needed to fill the void with the only thing he thought gave him value, which was the illusion of wealth. He snatched the heavy leather-bound wine list back from the center of the table and flipped it open with a dramatic flourish that nearly knocked over his water glass. We need a drink, Trey announced loudly, his voice cracking slightly. A real drink. None of this house wine garbage. If we are meeting the CEO of Onyx tonight, we need to be drinking like executives. We need to set the tone. He ran his finger down the page, muttering prices under his breath, looking for the highest number he could find. He did not care about the vintage or the region. He only cared about the zeros. Here we go, he said, tapping the page triumphantly. Chateau Petrus, 2015, $5,000. He looked up at Dante, a smirk plastering itself back onto his face. Hey, construction guy, Trey sneered. You ever see a bottle of wine that costs more than your truck? I bet you drink that boxed stuff they sell at the gas station. Do not worry. I will let you have a sip. I am generous like that. Maybe it will help you refine your palate, although I doubt you would know the difference between this and grape juice. Dante did not take the bait. He just leaned back in his chair, his face a mask of calm amusement. It is a bold choice, Trey, Dante said simply. Very earthy. Trey laughed. Earthy. Listen to him trying to sound smart. It is wine, idiot. It is made from grapes, not dirt. Trey snapped his fingers at Julian, who appeared instantly at his side. Boy, bring us the Petrus, the 15, and make sure it breathes. I do not want it tasting tight. He used words he had heard in movies, words he clearly did not understand. Julian nodded, his face completely impassive, but I saw the flicker of disdain in his eyes. Excellent choice, Sir Julian said. I will retrieve it from the cellar immediately. While we waited, Tiffany leaned in towards me, her voice dripping with that fake concern again. You know, Zoe, she whispered loud enough for Dante to hear. It is really sweet that Dante is trying to fit in. But maybe you should tell him not to speak when the men are talking about wine. It is embarrassing when he tries to sound sophisticated. Earthy. I mean, really, who describes wine like dirt? I looked at her perfectly applied makeup and her hollow eyes. Actually, Tiffany, I began, but Dante squeezed my hand under the table, stopping me. He did not need me to defend him. He was a lion watching a chihuahua bark. He knew exactly when to bite. Julian returned a few minutes later, cradling the dark bottle like it was a holy relic. He carried it with a white towel draped over his arm. He presented the label to Trey first, as protocol dictated, since Trey was the one paying. The Petrus, sir, Julian said. Trey barely glanced at it. Yeah, pop it open. Let us get this party started. Julian produced a silver corkscrew. The ritual of opening a bottle of that caliber is a performance. He cut the foil with surgical precision. He drove the worm into the cork smoothly. The room went silent as he pulled. The cork emerged with a soft, expensive pop that sounded like money leaving a bank account. Julian wiped the mouth of the bottle. He poured a small splash into a glass to be tasted. But he did not pour it for Trey. In a move that defied every standard rule of restaurant service, but adhered strictly to the secret hierarchy of the Onyx collection. Julian took a step to the left. He bypassed Trey completely. He bypassed my father. He stopped directly next to Dante. With a graceful tilt of the bottle, Julian poured the crimson liquid into Dante's glass. Sir Julian said, bowing his head slightly, "The first taste for you." The silence that followed was not the silence of awe. It was the silence of confusion, followed immediately by the explosion of a bruised ego. Trey stared at the empty glass in front of him. Then he stared at Dante. Then his face turned a violent shade of red that matched the wine. "Hey!" he shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "Are you blind?" Julian paused the bottle, still hovering over the table. "Excuse me, sir. I ordered the wine." Trey yelled, saliva flying from his mouth. "Me. I am the one with the credit card. I am the one paying the $5,000. Why are you serving him first? He is a nobody. He is the help. Give me that glass." My father looked up, sensing a slight against the family name. "This is unacceptable," Marcus growled. "We are the guests of honor here. You do not serve the laborer before the patrons. I want to speak to your manager." Julian did not flinch. He did not look at Marcus. He looked at Dante, waiting for instructions. In the hospitality world, serving the host first is a sign of ultimate respect. And Julian knew that Dante was not just a laborer. He knew Dante was the man who had designed the cellar this wine came from. I watched Dante. He did not rush. He picked up the glass by the stem, his fingers rough and calloused against the delicate crystal. He held it up to the light, tilting it slightly to check the color. "Relax." "Trey," Dante said, his voice calm and deep. "He is just following protocol." "Protocol," Trey spat. "The protocol is that the man with the money gets the wine. You are drinking on my dime. Put it down." Dante ignored him. He brought the glass to his nose. He closed his eyes and inhaled deeply. He swirled the wine, gently releasing the aromas. "It has opened up nicely," Dante murmured, more to himself than to the table. He took a sip. He let the wine roll over his tongue, letting it hit every palate point before swallowing. Trey was shaking with rage. "I am going to have you fired," he hissed at Julian. "I am going to have you thrown out on the street. Do you know who we are?" Dante set the glass down softly. "It is good," he said, looking at Julian. The clay soil from the Pomerol Plateau really comes through. You can taste the iron in the Merlot grapes. It has that classic truffle nose, but the finish is surprising. Hints of black cherry and maybe a touch of wet violet. It was a rainy harvest that year, wasn't it? Julian beamed, breaking his professional mask for a split second. Precisely, Sir, Julian said. The heavy rains in late August gave it a very distinct floral finish. You have an excellent palate, sir. Dante nodded. Pour for the table, Julian. Trey sat there, mouth open. He looked from Dante to Julian, unable to comprehend what had just happened. He had expected Dante to chug it. He had expected Dante to say it tasted like fruit juice. Instead, he had just heard a masterclass in oenology from a man wearing construction boots. Julian moved around the table, pouring for everyone else. When he finally poured Trey's glass, Trey grabbed it aggressively. He took a massive gulp, swallowing it without even tasting it. It tastes like grapes, Trey grumbled, wiping his mouth. Just like I said, you are just making stuff up. Wet violet. Give me a break. Flowers are not wet. Tiffany took a sip and wrinkled her nose. It is a little sour, she said, disappointed. I prefer something sweeter, like a Moscato. I watched Dante pick up his glass again, savoring the liquid that cost more than Tiffany's car. He looked at me and winked. It is an acquired taste, Tiffany, Dante said smoothly. Real quality usually is. It does not scream for attention. It just exists. Trey slammed his glass down, sloshing $500 worth of wine onto the tablecloth. Whatever, he snapped. It is just wine. We are not here to talk about flowers. We are here to meet the CEO. You said you could get us a meeting, Zoe. We paid for the dinner. We bought the wine. Now deliver. Where is he? I picked up my own glass, swirling the dark red liquid. I looked at the stains spreading on the white cloth near Trey's hand. It looked like blood. The CEO is very particular about punctuality, I said, checking my watch. And about manners. I glanced at the door. Dante cleared his throat. Actually, he said, leaning forward. Before we go upstairs, I think there is one more thing we need to clear up. What now? Marcus groaned, rubbing his temples. We apologized. We bought the wine. What more do you want, blood? No, Dante said. I want to talk about the investment. The one Trey is so excited about. Because if you are going to pitch to the CEO, you should probably know what you are actually buying. Trey puffed out his chest. I know what I am buying. I am buying the future. Dante reached into the inner pocket of his dusty work coat. He pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a blueprint, a small section of a floor plan. He unfolded it on the table, pushing the wine bottle aside. This is the architectural layout for the new Onyx expansion, Dante said, pointing to a specific room. The one your broker Chad told you about. Trey squinted at it. So what? It is a hotel room. No, Dante corrected. It is a utility closet. What Trey asked. Dante traced a line with his finger. The square footage your broker sold you corresponds to the janitorial supply closet on the 4th floor. You are not investing in a suite, Trey. You are investing in a place to store mops and buckets. Trey laughed nervously. You are lying. You do not know anything about the plans. You are just a contractor. Dante looked at him with pity. I am not a contractor, Trey. And I am not just a guy who pours concrete. He tapped the bottom corner of the blueprint. Look at the signature box, he said. Trey leaned in. I leaned in too, even though I knew what was there. In the bottom right corner in stark, bold lettering were the words, Lead Architect Dante Reynolds. Trey's eyes went wide. He looked up at Dante, then back down at the paper. Reynolds, he whispered. Your last name is Reynolds. Yes, Dante said, taking another sip of the Petrus. And I designed every single square inch of this hotel, including the closet you just tried to mortgage your grandmother's house to buy. The silence this time was heavy. It was the silence of a trap snapping shut on a leg. You drew this? Marcus asked, his voice barely audible. I designed it, Dante corrected. There is a difference. Tiffany let out a gasp. But you wear boots. I wear boots because I like to walk my sites, Dante said. I like to make sure the foundation is strong, unlike your investment portfolio. Trey slumped back in his chair, the expensive wine suddenly tasting like vinegar in his mouth. He looked at the blueprint, then at the wine bottle, then at me. "This is a joke, right?" he stammered. "You guys are pranking us." I stood up. I smoothed out my slacks. "No prank, Trey," I said, cold as ice. "And now that you have insulted the architect and tried to buy a broom closet, I think it is time you met the owner." I gestured to the door. "Shall we go upstairs?" I asked. "The CEO is waiting. And trust me, you do not want to keep her waiting." The air in the private dining alcove was thick enough to choke on. My father sat there simmering in his humiliation, picking at his napkin, like he wanted to shred it into 1,000 pieces. He had apologized to a man he considered beneath him, and it was eating him alive. But Trey, being Trey, could not stand the silence. He needed to fill the void with the only thing he thought gave him value, which was the illusion of wealth. He snatched the heavy leather-bound wine list back from the center of the table and flipped it open with a dramatic flourish that nearly knocked over his water glass. "We need a drink," Trey announced loudly, his voice cracking slightly. "A real drink, none of this house wine garbage. If we are meeting the CEO of Onyx tonight, we need to be drinking like executives. We need to set the tone." He ran his finger down the page, muttering prices under his breath, looking for the highest number he could find. He did not care about the vintage or the region. He only cared about the zeros. "Here we go," he said, tapping the page triumphantly. "Chateau Petrus, 2015, $5,000. He looked up at Dante, a smirk plastering itself back onto his face. "Hey, construction guy," Trey sneered. "You ever see a bottle of wine that costs more than your truck? I bet you drink that box stuff they sell at the gas station." "Do not worry, I will let you have a sip. I am generous like that. Maybe it will help you refine your palate, although I doubt you would know the difference between this and grape juice." Dante did not take the bait. He just leaned back in his chair, his face a mask of calm amusement. "It is a bold choice," Trey Dante said simply. "Very earthy." Trey laughed. "Earthy. Listen to him trying to sound smart. It is wine, idiot. It is made from grapes, not dirt." Trey snapped his fingers at Julian, who appeared instantly at his side. "Boy, bring us the Petrus, the 15. And make sure it breathes. I do not want it tasting tight." He used words he had heard in movies, words he clearly did not understand. Julian nodded, his face completely impassive, but I saw the flicker of disdain in his eyes. "Excellent choice," Sir Julian said. "I will retrieve it from the cellar immediately." While we waited, Tiffany leaned in towards me, her voice dripping with that fake concern again. "You know, Zoe," she whispered loud enough for Dante to hear. "It is really sweet that Dante is trying to fit in, but maybe you should tell him not to speak when the men are talking about wine. It is embarrassing when he tries to sound sophisticated. Earthy. I mean, really, who describes wine like dirt?" I looked at her perfectly applied makeup and her hollow eyes. "Actually, Tiffany," I began, but Dante squeezed my hand under the table, stopping me. He did not need me to defend him. He was a lion watching a chihuahua bark. He knew exactly when to bite. Julian returned a few minutes later, cradling the dark bottle like it was a holy relic. He carried it with a white towel draped over his arm. He presented the label to Trey first, as protocol dictated, since Trey was the one paying. "The Petrus, sir," Julian said. Trey barely glanced at it. Yeah, pop it open. Let us get this party started." Julian produced a silver corkscrew. The ritual of opening a bottle of that caliber is a performance. He cut the foil with surgical precision. He drove the worm into the cork smoothly. The room went silent as he pulled. The cork emerged with a soft, expensive pop that sounded like money leaving a bank account. Julian wiped the mouth of the bottle. He poured a small splash into a glass to be tasted, but he did not pour it for Trey. In a move that defied every standard rule of restaurant service, but adhered strictly to the secret hierarchy of the Onyx collection, Julian took a step to the left. He bypassed Trey completely. He bypassed my father. He stopped directly next to Dante. With a graceful tilt of the bottle, Julian poured the crimson liquid into Dante's glass. Sir Julian said, bowing his head slightly, "The first taste for you." The silence that followed was not the silence of awe. It was the silence of confusion, followed immediately by the explosion of a bruised ego. Trey stared at the empty glass in front of him. Then he stared at Dante. Then his face turned a violent shade of red that matched the wine. "Hey!" he shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "Are you blind?" Julian paused, the bottle still hovering over the table. "Excuse me, sir." "I ordered the wine." Trey yelled, saliva flying from his mouth. "Me. I am the one with the credit card. I am the one paying the $5,000. Why are you serving him first? He is a nobody. He is the help. Give me that glass." My father looked up, sensing a slight against the family name. "This is unacceptable," Marcus growled. "We are the guests of honor here. You do not serve the laborer before the patrons. I want to speak to your manager." Julian did not flinch. He did not look at Marcus. He looked at Dante, waiting for instructions. In the hospitality world, serving the host first is a sign of ultimate respect. And Julian knew that Dante was not just a laborer. He knew Dante was the man who had designed the cellar this wine came from. I watched Dante. He did not rush. He picked up the glass by the stem, his fingers rough and calloused against the delicate crystal. He held it up to the light, tilting it slightly to check the color. "Relax, Trey Dante," said his voice calm and deep. "He is just following protocol." "Protocol," Trey spat. "The protocol is that the man with the money gets the wine. You are drinking on my dime. Put it down." Dante ignored him. He brought the glass to his nose. He closed his eyes and inhaled deeply. He swirled the wine, gently releasing the aromas. "It has opened up nicely," Dante murmured, more to himself than to the table. He took a sip. He let the wine roll over his tongue, letting it hit every palate point before swallowing. Trey was shaking with rage. "I am going to have you fired," he hissed at Julian. "I am going to have you thrown out on the street. Do you know who we are?" Dante set the glass down softly. "It is good," he said, looking at Julian. "The clay soil from the Pomerol Plateau really comes through. You can taste the iron in the Merlot grapes. It has that classic truffle nose, but the finish is surprising. Hints of black cherry, and maybe a touch of wet violet. It was a rainy harvest that year, wasn't it?" Julian beamed, breaking his professional mask for a split second. "Precisely," Sir Julian said. "The heavy rains in late August gave it a very distinct floral finish." "You have an excellent palate, sir." Dante nodded. "Pour for the table, Julian." Trey sat there, mouth open. He looked from Dante to Julian, unable to comprehend what had just happened. He had expected Dante to chug it. He had expected Dante to say it tasted like fruit juice. Instead, he had just heard a masterclass in oenology from a man wearing construction boots. Julian moved around the table, pouring for everyone else. When he finally poured Trey's glass, Trey grabbed it aggressively. He took a massive gulp, swallowing it without even tasting it. "It tastes like grapes," Trey grumbled, wiping his mouth. "Just like I said, you are just making stuff up. Wet violet. Give me a break. Flowers are not wet." Tiffany took a sip and wrinkled her nose. "It is a little sour," she said, disappointed. "I prefer something sweeter, like a Moscato." I watched Dante pick up his glass again, savoring the liquid that cost more than Tiffany's car. He looked at me and winked. "It is an acquired taste," Tiffany, Dante said smoothly. "Real quality usually is. It does not scream for attention. It just exists." Trey slammed his glass down, sloshing $500 worth of wine onto the tablecloth. "Whatever," he snapped. "It is just wine. We are not here to talk about flowers. We are here to meet the CEO. You said you could get us a meeting, Zoe. We paid for the dinner. We bought the wine. Now deliver." "Where is he?" I picked up my own glass, swirling the dark red liquid. I looked at the stain spreading on the white cloth near Trey's hand. It looked like blood. The CEO is very particular about punctuality, I said, checking my watch. And about manners. I glanced at the door. Dante cleared his throat. Actually, he said, leaning forward, before we go upstairs, I think there is one more thing we need to clear up. What now? Marcus groaned, rubbing his temples. We apologized. We bought the wine. What more do you want, blood? No, Dante said. I want to talk about the investment. The one Trey is so excited about. Because if you are going to pitch to the CEO, you should probably know what you are actually buying. Trey puffed out his chest. I know what I am buying. I am buying the future. Dante reached into the inner pocket of his dusty work coat. He pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a blueprint. A small section of a floor plan. He unfolded it on the table, pushing the wine bottle aside. This is the architectural layout for the new Onyx expansion, Dante said, pointing to a specific room. The one your broker Chad told you about. Trey squinted at it. So what? It is a hotel room. No, Dante corrected. It is a utility closet. What? Trey asked. Dante traced a line with his finger. The square footage your broker sold you corresponds to the janitorial supply closet on the 4th floor. You are not investing in a suite, Trey. You are investing in a place to store mops and buckets. Trey laughed nervously. You are lying. You do not know anything about the plans. You are just a contractor. Dante looked at him with pity. I am not a contractor, Trey. And I am not just a guy who pours concrete. He tapped the bottom corner of the blueprint. Look at the signature box, he said. Trey leaned in. I leaned in too, even though I knew what was there. In the bottom right corner in stark bold lettering were the words, Lead Architect Dante Reynolds. Trey's eyes went wide. He looked up at Dante, then back down at the paper. Reynolds, he whispered. Your last name is Reynolds. Yes, Dante said, taking another sip of the Petrus. And I designed every single square inch of this hotel, including the closet you just tried to mortgage your grandmother's house to buy. The silence this time was heavy. It was the silence of a trap snapping shut on a leg. You drew this, Marcus asked, his voice barely audible. I designed it, Dante corrected. There is a difference. Tiffany let out a gasp. But you wear boots. I wear boots because I like to walk my sites, Dante said. I like to make sure the foundation is strong. Unlike your investment portfolio. Trey slumped back in his chair, the expensive wine suddenly tasting like vinegar in his mouth. He looked at the blueprint, then at the wine bottle, then at me. This is a joke, right? He stammered. You guys are pranking us. I stood up. I smoothed out my slacks. No prank, Trey, I said, cold as ice. And now that you have insulted the architect and tried to buy a broom closet, I think it is time you met the owner. I gestured to the door. Shall we go upstairs? I asked. The CEO is waiting, and trust me, you do not want to keep her waiting. One would think that finding out your luxury hotel suite was actually a janitor's closet would be a wake-up call, but the human brain is fascinatingly resilient when it comes to protecting its own ego. Trey stared at the blueprint for a solid 10 seconds, his face twitching slightly before he shoved the paper back across the table toward Dante. That is an old draft, Trey declared, his voice regaining some of its bluster. That has to be an outdated version. My broker Chad told me the plans were revised last week. They combined the utility spaces to create a micro-luxury executive suite. It is a new concept in hospitality. You would not know about it because you probably only work on the structural stuff, not the high-level interior strategy. I looked at Dante. He kept his face perfectly straight, but I saw the muscle in his jaw jump. He had designed that building from the ground up. There was no micro-luxury executive suite. There was just a room for mops and a slop sink. But arguing with a fool only proves that there are two fools, so I decided to pivot. Okay, Trey, I said, leaning forward and clasping my hands. Let us assume for a moment that you are right and the lead architect sitting next to me is wrong. Let us talk about the money. You want to mortgage Grandma's house for $5 million. What exactly are you buying with that cash? Trey straightened his tie, looking relieved to be talking about finance instead of floor plans. It is simple, Zoe. I am buying equity. Chad has a connection on the inside of the Onyx board. He is offering me pre-IPO shares at a 40% discount. It is called a private placement. They need liquid cash fast to fund the Dubai expansion, so they are selling stock to select investors before the company goes public next year. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. It was a classic advance fee fraud, the kind of scam that targeted greedy people who thought they were smarter than the system. Trey, I said, keeping my voice level. Onyx is a private company. I know for a fact that they are not going public next year. And even if they were, they would not be selling discounted shares to random investors through a third-party broker named Chad. That is illegal. It is insider trading at best and a Ponzi scheme at worst. Marcus groaned, rolling his eyes so hard I thought they might get stuck. Here we go again, Marcus muttered. The negativity. The pessimism. This is why you never got ahead, Zoe. You see an opportunity, and you look for holes. Trey sees an opportunity, and he sees a ladder. It is not pessimism, Dad. It is due diligence, I argued. Think about it. Why would a company valued at nearly $1 billion need your $5 million so badly that they would sell it at a discount? If the stock is so valuable, why aren't they keeping it? Because they like me, Trey shouted, slamming his hand on the table. Because Chad believes in my vision. He knows I am going to be a player in this industry. He is doing me a favor. A favor, I repeated incredulously. A stranger is handing you millions of dollars in potential profit out of the goodness of his heart. Trey, listen to yourself. You are about to hand over the deed to the only asset this family has left for a promise written on a napkin. Tiffany scoffed loudly, tapping her long fingernails against her wine glass. God, you are so transparent, Zoe. I turned to look at her. Excuse me. You are jealous, she said simply, as if stating a fact like the sky is blue. You are sitting there turning green because Trey is about to make a fortune, and you are stuck in your little middle-class life. You cannot stand the idea that your little brother is going to be richer than you. It eats you up inside, doesn't it? I stared at her, unable to comprehend the level of delusion. I am trying to stop him from going to prison or losing everything, I said. No, you are trying to keep him down, Tiffany countered. Because as long as Trey is struggling, you get to feel superior. You get to play the responsible big sister. But the moment he surpasses you, the moment he becomes the tycoon he was born to be, you become irrelevant. And that terrifies you. She took a sip of her wine, leaving a lipstick stain on the rim. And let us be honest, Tiffany continued, her eyes flicking over to Dante. It must be hard for you, seeing Trey make power moves while your husband, well, what does he do exactly? He draws lines on paper, he gets dirty, he trades his time for an hourly wage. She laughed, a soft, cruel sound. It is cute, really. But Trey is not a worker, Zoe. Trey is an owner. He uses his mind to generate wealth, not his back. I understand why that makes you insecure. You married a laborer and I married a visionary. We are just on different levels. I felt Dante shift beside me. I knew he was not angry for himself. He was angry for me. He was angry that I had to listen to this poison. I looked at Marcus, expecting him to shut this down, to say that Dante was family and deserved respect. But Marcus was nodding. She has a point, Zoe. Marcus said, you have always been competitive with Trey. You need to put your jealousy aside and support him. Sign the house over. Let him make this deal. When the money comes in, he will pay off the mortgage and buy you a new house. A better one. One that does not smell like old people. I looked at the three of them. My father, the enabler. My brother, the mark. And my sister-in-law, the instigator. They were a perfect triangle of toxicity. They were so convinced of their own brilliance that they were willing to walk straight into a fire and blame me for the smoke. I realized then that I could not save them. You cannot save people who are determined to drown, especially when they think the water is made of gold. I took a deep breath, and let it out slowly. Okay, I said softly. Trey blinked. Okay, what? Okay, I said. You are right. I am jealous. I am jealous of your vision, Trey. I am jealous of your connection with Chad. And I am definitely jealous of Tiffany's ability to spot a visionary. Trey's face broke into a wide grin. He elbowed Marcus. See, Dad, I told you she would come around. She just needed to hear the truth. So I continued ignoring his celebration. If this deal is real, then the CEO of Onyx will know about it. If Chad is a legitimate partner, then the owner of the company will be able to verify his status immediately. Exactly, Trey said, confident now. That is why we need this meeting. Once the CEO gives the thumbs up, you sign the house over right there on the spot. I nodded. Deal. If the CEO confirms that Chad and this investment are legitimate, I will sign the deed over to you tonight. I will give you the house. And you will apologize for calling me a scammer, Trey added. Yes, I said. And I will apologize. But if the CEO says it is a fraud, Trey laughed, waving his hand. Won't happen. But sure, if it is a fraud, I do not know. I will wash dishes. I looked at Dante. He gave me a tiny, almost imperceptible smile. He knew what was coming. You will do more than wash dishes, Trey, I thought. Fine, I said, standing up. The time for talking is over. You want validation. You want the truth. Let us go get it. I gestured toward the elevators that led to the penthouse offices. Come on, I said. Do not leave your expensive wine behind. You might need it to swallow what is coming next. Trey jumped up, grabbing the bottle of Petrus by the neck like a club. Lead the way, big sister, he said, swaggering toward the exit. Get ready to eat your words. I walked behind them, watching them strut through the restaurant. They walked like royalty, oblivious to the fact that they were marching toward the guillotine. And I was the one holding the rope. Tiffany whispered something to Marcus, and they both chuckled, looking back at Dante's work boots. I fell into step beside my husband. Are you ready? Dante whispered. I took his arm, feeling the solid muscle beneath the rough canvas coat. I was born ready, I whispered back. Let us go introduce them to the real world. We walked past the host stand where Mr. Henderson gave me a sharp nod. He picked up the phone immediately, probably to alert security that the show was moving to the main stage. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime waiting to carry us up to the 42nd floor. Going up, Trey announced, pressing the button for the penthouse. Yes, I thought, stepping inside as the doors closed on my old life. Going up, and then coming all the way down. The elevator doors slid open with a whisper, revealing a space that was less like an office and more like a temple to modern power. The penthouse boardroom was encased in floor-to-ceiling glass, offering a panoramic view of the Chicago skyline that looked like a jeweled necklace laid out against the velvet night. The floors were polished marble that reflected our silhouettes like dark ghosts, and in the center of the room sat a massive table made of a single slab of obsidian stone. It was a room designed to make you feel small. It was a room designed to make you feel like you were standing in the presence of a god. Trey stepped out first, his earlier bravado faltering for just a second as the sheer scale of the wealth around him hit home. He adjusted his jacket, pulling at the cuffs, as if trying to shield himself with his cheap suit. Tiffany's eyes went wide, scanning the room not with appreciation but with the calculative greed of someone tallying up a price tag. She ran her hand along the back of a leather chair, leaving a streak of oil from her skin on the pristine material. Nice, she murmured. This guy must be loaded. I bet this table alone costs more than your house, Zoe. I did not answer. I walked over to the window and looked out at the city I had conquered. My reflection stared back at me, calm and impassive. Behind me I heard the heavy footsteps of my father pacing back and forth on the marble. The sound was erratic, sharp, and nervous. He was a man who thrived on being the biggest fish in a small pond. But up here in the ocean he was realizing just how small he really was. He checked his gold watch for the third time in a minute. "Where is he?" Marcus muttered, his voice echoing slightly in the vast space. The meeting was supposed to start. Punctuality is the first rule of business. If he is making us wait, it is a power play. He turned his agitation toward the easiest target in the room. Me. He marched over to where I was standing and grabbed my arms, spinning me around. His grip was tight, painful, a physical manifestation of the control he felt slipping away. "We have a few minutes before he walks through that door," Marcus hissed, his face inches from mine. "I want this settled. When I introduce Trey as a partner, I need to show that he has liquid assets. I need to show that the Washington family is fully invested." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the tattered remains of the quitclaim deed, the one I had ripped in half downstairs. He had taped it back together with Scotch tape he must have had in his briefcase. The sight of it was pathetic, a desperate attempt to patch up a reality that was already broken. "Sign it," he commanded, slamming the taped document onto the obsidian table. I looked at the paper, then up at him. The tape was crooked. It was a perfect metaphor for his entire life plan. "I told you downstairs, Dad," I said, my voice steady. "The answer is no. I am not signing over my grandmother's house for a fantasy." Marcus's face turned a deep, violent shade of red. The veins in his neck bulged against his collar. The stress of the evening, the humiliation with the wine, the fear of the looming meeting, all of it boiled over into a singular point of rage. He slammed his hand down on the table with a sound like a gunshot. "Enough," he roared. Trey and Tiffany jumped. Dante took a step forward, his body tensing, ready to intervene, but I held up a hand, stopping him. I needed to hear this. I needed to see how far he would go. "I am done playing games with you, Zoe," Marcus shouted, his spit flying onto the polished stone. "I have coddled you. I have tolerated your disrespect. I have let you sit here and mock your brother's ambition. But I will not let you ruin this family's future. You are a crab in a bucket, pulling everyone else down with you because you are too mediocre to climb out yourself." He leaned in closer, his eyes wide and manic. "I am giving you an ultimatum, right now. Two choices." He held up one finger, shaking it in my face. "Choice number one. You pick up that pen, you sign this paper, and you give your brother the collateral he needs to secure his destiny. You do your duty as a daughter and as a sister." He held up a second finger. "Or choice number two. I remove your name from the family trust. I remove your name from the will. I remove you from the family tree entirely. I will go home tonight and I will burn every photo of you. I will tell everyone that I only have one child. As far as I am concerned, if you walk out of this room without signing that paper, I never gave birth to you. You will be dead to me." The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. It filled the corners of the room, pressing in on my eardrums. I looked at Trey. He was looking down at his shoes, unable to meet my gaze, but he did not speak up. He did not say, "Dad, that is too far." He just stood there, willing to sacrifice his sister for a check. I looked at Tiffany. She was smirking, a small, triumphant curl of her lips that said, "Finally." I looked back at my father. He was breathing hard, waiting for me to crumble. He expected tears. He expected begging. He expected the little girl who just wanted her daddy to love her, to fall to her knees and do anything to keep her place in the tribe. But he was looking at a stranger. I walked slowly to the table. The sound of my heels on the marble was rhythmic and precise. I reached into my purse. Marcus's eyes lit up. He thought I was reaching for a pen to sign the deed. He straightened his jacket, a smug look of victory washing over his face. He thought he had broken me. Instead, I pulled out my checkbook. It was a sleek black book bound in leather. I opened it and clicked my pen. Marcus frowned, confused. "What are you doing?" "That is not the deed." I ignored him. I wrote the date in neat cursive script. I filled out the line for the payee, writing simply, "Marcus Washington." Then I moved to the amount box. I did not write a number. I drew a long, straight line. I signed my name at the bottom. Zoe Washington. The signature was bold, unhesitating. I tore the check out with a crisp, ripping sound that echoed the earlier tearing of the deed. I slid it across the obsidian table until it rested right in front of him, next to the taped-up document. "What is this?" Marcus asked, staring at the piece of paper as if it were a bomb. "It is blank." I looked him straight in the eyes, my gaze piercing through his bluster, through his ego, right down to the small, frightened man hiding inside. "You said I had two choices," I said, my voice calm but cold as the winter wind outside. "You said I could buy my way back into this family, or I could leave." I pointed to the check. "There is your choice, Dad. Fill it in. Write down the price. How much is a father's love worth? How much does it cost to keep my name on your family tree? Is it 5 million? Is it 10? Write any number you want." Marcus stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. You do not have that kind of money. This is a joke." I leaned in, placing my hands on the table, leaning into his personal space. "Are you sure?" I asked. He blinked, taken aback by the intensity of my question. "Are you sure I am useless?" I whispered. "Are you sure I am the failure you say I am? Because if you take that check, if you fill in a number, you are admitting that your love is a transaction. You are admitting that I am nothing more to you than an asset to be liquidated. So go ahead, put a price tag on your daughter. But know this: once you write that number, you can never take it back." Marcus looked at the check. I saw the greed warring with the shame in his eyes. I saw him calculating. He did not believe I had millions, but he thought maybe I had enough to cover Trey's debts. He thought maybe I was bluffing about the amount, but he was tempted to call it. He reached out his hand, trembling slightly, and picked up the check. He did not rip it up. He did not throw it back at me. He folded it and put it in his pocket. "I am absolutely sure," he said, his voice devoid of any warmth, any humanity. "You are useless to me unless you pay. So yes, I will keep this. Consider it a down payment on the years I wasted raising you." He patted his pocket where the check now sat against his heart. "Keep it as a souvenir," I said softly, standing up straight. "Because it is the last thing you will ever get from me." I turned my back on him. I walked over to Dante, who was watching me with a look of profound sorrow and immense pride. He knew what that moment cost me. He knew that I had just severed the final tether. Dante took my hand. I looked at the closed double doors at the far end of the room, the doors that led to the inner sanctum. "Is the CEO coming?" Trey asked, his voice cutting through the tension, oblivious to the tragedy that had just occurred. "We are ready now. Dad has the check. We have assets." I looked at my brother. I looked at the father who had just sold me for a blank piece of paper. "Yes," I said, feeling a strange sense of lightness, a freedom I had never known before. "The CEO is here." And with that I turned toward the head of the obsidian table, the seat that had been empty this entire time, waiting for its master. I did not walk to the door to let someone in. I walked to the chair. Because the person they were waiting for, the person who was going to decide their fate, had been in the room all along. The silence in the penthouse boardroom was heavy enough to crush a diamond, but it was about to get heavier. My father had just pocketed the blank check I gave him, effectively selling our relationship for a promise of cash, but the universe has a funny way of balancing the books immediately. Just as the emotional transaction concluded, the financial one began. The double doors opened and Mr. Henderson walked in. He was not smiling. He was not carrying a silver tray with champagne to celebrate the upcoming meeting. He was carrying a slim black leather folder. I watched him approach the obsidian table. He moved with the silent lethality of a panther. He placed the folder directly in front of Trey. "The bill, sir," Mr. Henderson said, his voice devoid of any inflection. "We require the tab to be settled before the CEO enters. It is company policy for private dining experiences." Trey laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound that bounced off the glass walls. "Of course. Policy. We respect policy." He reached for the folder with a hand that was shaking ever so slightly. He flipped it open. I saw his eyes widen. I knew exactly what the number was. The Osetra caviar, the $5,000 bottle of Chateau Petrus, the dry-aged steaks, the service charge, the private room fee. It came to exactly $8,420. Chump change, Trey muttered, trying to maintain his facade in front of the empty CEO chair. He pulled out his wallet. It was a flashy designer thing, with a logo so big it looked desperate. He extracted a platinum-colored credit card and tossed it onto the table like he was dealing a winning hand of poker. "Put it on the Amex," Trey said, leaning back and crossing his arms. "And add a 20% tip. We are not cheap." Mr. Henderson picked up the card. He did not walk away to a register. He pulled a mobile card terminal from his pocket. He inserted the chip right there in front of us. The machine lit up, casting a blue glow on the polished black stone. We all watched it. The screen said processing. The little dots moved across the display. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. And then a sharp mechanical beep cut through the room. Mr. Henderson frowned. He looked at the screen and then at Trey. "Declined," he said simply. Trey sat up straight. "That is impossible. Do it again. The chip is probably dirty. It is an old machine." Mr. Henderson did not argue. He removed the card, wiped the chip on his sleeve, and inserted it again. The room held its breath. "Processing." "Beep." "Declined," Mr. Henderson repeated, his voice dropping an octave. "The bank is not authorizing the charge, sir. It says insufficient funds." Trey's face went from flush to pale in a heartbeat. He snatched the card back. "That is ridiculous. I have a $50,000 limit on that card. Your machine is broken. Here, try this one." He pulled out a second card. A gold one this time. He shoved it at Mr. Henderson. Mr. Henderson took it, inserted it. "Processing." "Beep." "Declined." My father shifted in his chair. He unbuttoned his suit jacket. I could see a bead of sweat tracking down his temple. "Trey, what is going on?" Marcus asked, his voice tight. "Just pay the man. Stop playing games. The CEO will be here any second." "I am trying." "Dad," Trey snapped, his panic rising. "It is their system. It is rejecting my cards. It must be the Wi-Fi up here. It is too high up. The signal is bad." Mr. Henderson stared at him. "Our Wi-Fi is fiber optic, sir. The signal is perfect. Do you have another form of payment?" Trey was digging through his wallet now, frantically pulling out cards. A debit card, a rewards card, a gas station card. He handed them over one by one. Declined. 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 The pile of rejected plastic grew on the obsidian table like a monument to his failure. Tiffany, who had been reapplying her lipstick, froze. She looked at Trey, her eyes narrowing into slits. "Trey," she said, her voice dangerously low. "You told me you transferred the funds from the joint account yesterday. You showed me the screenshot on your phone. You said we had 200,000 liquid." Trey refused to look at her. He was staring at the card terminal as if he could will it to work. "I did transfer it, babe. I did. It is just, the bank holds it sometimes. You know how it is." Tiffany stood up. She walked over to him and grabbed his arm, digging her nails into his suit jacket. "Do not lie to me, Trey Washington. I checked the app this morning. The money was there. Where did it go?" Trey pulled his arm away. "I moved it, okay. I moved it to a secure holding account." "What holding account?" Tiffany screamed. "The exchange." Trey yelled back, his facade finally shattering. "I put it into the exchange. There was a dip in the crypto market last night. Dogecoin plummeted. I thought if I bought the dip, I could double our money by morning. I put everything in. The mortgage money, the savings, the car payments, all of it." The silence in the room was absolute. Even the air conditioning seemed to stop humming. "You put our life savings into a meme coin," Tiffany whispered. "It was supposed to bounce back." Trey stammered, his eyes darting around the room looking for an exit. "But the exchange..." They froze withdrawals this morning. Some kind of server maintenance. I cannot get the money out. It is locked. So you are telling me? Marcus said, standing up slowly, his voice trembling with a mixture of rage and terror. That you have no money. That we just ate an $8,000 dinner. And you have $0 to pay for it. It is temporary, Dad Trey pleaded. As soon as the servers come back up, we are rich. I swear. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat. The sound was like a gavel striking a judge's bench. Sir Mr. Henderson said, addressing my father, I am afraid I cannot accept server maintenance as legal tender. We have provided a service. We have opened a $5,000 bottle of wine which has been consumed. If you cannot produce a valid form of payment immediately, I will have no choice but to escalate this. Escalate? Marcus asked, wiping his forehead with a handkerchief. What do you mean, escalate? Can we work out a payment plan? I can write you a check. We do not accept personal checks, Mr. Henderson said coldly. Especially not after 3 declined credit cards. And given the amount, this falls under the category of felony theft of services. He reached for the phone on the wall. I am calling the Chicago Police Department. No, Marcus screamed, lunging forward. Do not call the police. Do not do that. Think of my reputation. I am Marcus Washington. I am a pillar of this community. You cannot have police arresting me in a hotel lobby. It will be on the news by morning. Mr. Henderson paused, his hand hovering over the receiver. Then pay the bill, sir. I cannot, Marcus stammered. My assets are tied up in trusts. I do not carry that kind of cash. He turned to me. His eyes were wide, desperate, pleading. He looked at the daughter he had just disowned. He looked at the woman he had called useless 5 minutes ago. Zoe, he gasped. Zoe, please. You have money. You said you had enough. Pay the bill. I command you. No. I beg you. Do not let them arrest us. I sat there on the obsidian chair, feeling the cold stone against my back. I looked at the pile of declined cards. I looked at Trey, who was now sobbing into his hands. I looked at Tiffany, who was staring out the window, disassociating from reality. And I looked at my father, begging for his dignity. I slowly picked up the blank check I had given him, the one he had put in his pocket. I thought I was useless, Dad, I said softly. I thought I was dead to you. Zoe, please, Marcus cried. The police are coming. I looked at Mr. Henderson. I gave him a tiny nod. Mr. Henderson picked up the phone. Security, he said into the receiver. Hold the line for the police. I leaned back. I am not paying, I said. Marcus fell back into his chair as if his strings had been cut. But surely, I added, looking at the door, the CEO might make an exception, if you ask her nicely. The handle of the double doors turned, and the final act began. The threat of handcuffs has a way of stripping a man of his pretenses faster than any divorce lawyer ever could. My father, who just 10 minutes ago was lecturing me on the importance of legacy and the Washington family name, was now sweating through his Egyptian cotton shirt, looking at me with the desperate eyes of a trapped animal. The restaurant manager, Mr. Henderson, stood by the door with the phone receiver pressed to his ear, waiting for the police dispatcher to pick up. The word felony hung in the air like a guillotine blade ready to drop. You have to pay it, Zoe. Marcus hissed, his voice cracking with panic. I know you have savings. You have been working for 10 years. You must have something put away. 5,000, 8,000. Whatever you have, give it to them. I looked at him calmly. You want me to empty my savings account? The money I was saving for a house. The money you said I was hoarding like a miser. You want me to spend it on a bottle of wine I did not drink and a steak I was not allowed to order? Yes, Marcus screamed, slamming his hand on the armrest of his chair. Yes, I want you to spend it. Do you want to see your father in a mugshot? Do you want to see your brother in jail? This is an emergency. This is what families do. They sacrifice. Now give him your card. I looked at Trey. He was slumped in his chair, wiping his nose with his sleeve, looking like a child who had lost his mother in a grocery store. The arrogance was gone, replaced by pure terror. He knew that if the police came, they would look into his finances. They would see the crypto losses. They would see the fraud. "Please," Zoe Trey whispered. "I will pay you back. I swear. Just make them stop." I turned my gaze to Tiffany. She was not begging. She was looking at me with hatred, as if this was somehow my fault. As if my refusal to magically produce money earlier was the reason her husband was a failure. "Well," Tiffany snapped, "what are you waiting for? A written invitation. If you have the money, pay the bill. Stop enjoying this. It is sick." I took a slow, deep breath. They were right about one thing. I was enjoying this. I was enjoying seeing the facade crumble. But I also knew that if the police arrived, the meeting with the CEO would never happen. And I needed that meeting. I needed the final reveal. I needed them to know exactly who they had underestimated. "I cannot let you go to jail, Dad." I said, my voice soft, but laced with steel. It would be too embarrassing for the family brand. I reached into my small black clutch. Marcus let out a sigh of relief that sounded like a tire deflating. "Thank God. I knew you would do the right thing. I knew you were a good girl deep down." I ignored his patronizing praise. I dug past my lipstick, past my phone, and felt the cold, hard edge of the card. It was not plastic. It was made of anodized titanium. It was heavy. It absorbed the light rather than reflecting it. I pulled it out and held it between two fingers. It was completely black. There were no numbers embossed on the front. No bank logo. No expiration date. Just a small single gemstone embedded in the top right corner. A piece of black onyx that caught the light from the chandelier, and the name Washington Laser, etched in silver near the bottom. I tossed it onto the table. It landed with a heavy metallic clatter that sounded nothing like the flimsy plastic cards Trey had used. Tiffany leaned forward, squinting at it, her lip curled in disgust. "What is that?" she asked, letting out a short, derisive laugh. "A library card. Or is that one of those prepaid gas cards they give out at shelters? It does not even have a Visa logo on it." "God, Zoe, even when you try to help, you have to be weird about it. That thing is not going to work. It looks like a prop from a bad sci-fi movie." Trey looked at it too, shaking his head. "She is right, Zoe. That is not a credit card. The machine will not even read it. Stop wasting time. Give them a real card. A debit card. Anything with a magnetic strip." Mr. Henderson, who had been watching us with a look of utter boredom, lowered the phone. He had not connected to the police yet. He walked back over to the table, sighing as if dealing with unruly children. "Miss Washington," he said, his tone clipped and impatient. "I agree with your sister-in-law. If this is a game, I have no patience for it. We need a valid form of payment issued by a recognized financial institution, not a novelty item." He reached out to pick up the card, intending to hand it back to me with a lecture on wasting his time. His fingers brushed the cold metal surface. He froze. I saw the moment his brain registered the weight. I saw the moment his eyes caught the glint of the real black onyx stone embedded in the titanium. I saw the moment he read the name etched in silver. Washington. His eyes shot up to meet mine. For the first time all night, he actually looked at me. He looked past the plain turtleneck, past the lack of jewelry, past the quiet demeanor. He saw the face he had seen in the company newsletters. He saw the face that was framed in the portrait hanging in the lobby of the global headquarters. His face went pale. The blood drained from his cheeks so fast I thought he might faint. His mouth opened, but no sound came out for a solid 3 seconds. He dropped the phone. It clattered to the floor, the cord stretching, but he did not even flinch. He took a step back, then another, and then right there in front of my confused father and my arrogant brother, the manager of the most exclusive restaurant in Chicago, bent at the waist, he bowed. It was not a polite nod. It was a deep 90-degree bow of absolute deference. "Madame," he stammered, his voice shaking so hard it was barely audible. "Madam, I I had no idea. The room went silent. Marcus looked at Mr. Henderson, then at me, then back at Mr. Henderson. What are you doing? Marcus asked, confused. Why are you bowing to her? She is just a receptionist. Just run the card if it works. Mr. Henderson ignored him. He straightened up, but he kept his head lowered, his eyes fixed on the floor near my feet. He held the black card in his hands like it was a sacred artifact. I apologize profusely, Madame Henderson said, sweat beading on his forehead. We were not informed of your visit. Security did not radio up. If I had known, if I had any idea that the founder was dining with us tonight. He looked up at me, his eyes pleading for mercy. Please forgive the lapse in protocol. The bill is taken care of. Obviously. There is no need for payment. The house is yours. Tiffany laughed, a nervous, confused sound. Founder! What are you talking about? She is not a founder. She is unemployed. And what do you mean the bill is taken care of? Did the card work or not? Mr. Henderson turned to Tiffany. His eyes, which had been warm and terrified when looking at me, turned ice cold. Do not speak to her with that tone, he snapped. Tiffany recoiled as if slapped. Excuse me. Mr. Henderson turned back to me, holding out the card with two hands, offering it back to me. Shall I clear the room, madame? Shall I have security remove these guests so you can enjoy your evening in peace? I took the card back, sliding it into my clutch. I looked at my father. His mouth was hanging open. He was trying to process the words he had just heard. Founder, madame, house is yours. No, Mr. Henderson. I said, my voice cool and composed. Let them stay. They are here for a meeting, remember? Mr. Henderson nodded vigorously. Of course. The meeting. The boardroom is ready. The staff is on standby. Whatever you need, madame. Marcus stood up slowly. His legs seemed unsteady. Zoe, he whispered. Why is he calling you that? What is going on? I stood up. I smoothed out my slacks. Mr. Henderson, I said, ignoring my father, please escort my guests to the boardroom. I will meet them there in 5 minutes. I have a phone call to make. Yes, madame. Right away, madame. Mr. Henderson turned to Marcus and Trey. His attitude was no longer one of disdain, but it was also not one of respect. It was the attitude of a man herding cattle for his boss. This way, he said, gesturing sharply to the double doors. Move along. Madame Washington needs the room. Madame Washington. My father flinched at the name. It was the name he thought belonged to his mother or his wife. He never thought it would belong to his daughter in a way that commanded armies. They walked toward the doors, Trey looking back over his shoulder at me, his eyes wide with fear and confusion, Tiffany clutching her fake bag like a shield, and Marcus walking like a man in a dream. As the doors closed behind them, leaving me alone in the private dining room, I pulled out my phone. I dialed a number. It is done, I said into the receiver. I am coming in. Prepare the projection. I hung up and looked at my reflection in the darkened window. The girl who had waited at the church was gone. The woman who stared back was ready to burn the kingdom down to build something better from the ashes. The walk from the private dining room to the executive elevators felt like a funeral procession, but my family seemed to think it was a coronation parade. Mr. Henderson had cleared the hallway, his staff standing with their backs against the wall, heads bowed as we passed. To Marcus and Trey, this was simply the respect they believed they were owed, the natural order of things restoring itself after the glitch with the credit card machine. They walked with their chests puffed out, adjusting their lapels, shaking off the terror of the police threat as if it had never happened. You see, Dante said, his voice smooth and calm as he pressed the call button for the private lift. There was no need for panic. If the machine is broken, the logical step is to take the complaint to the top. The CEO is a reasonable person. I am sure she will want to hear all about your experience tonight. Trey let out a short, arrogant laugh. He ran a hand through his hair, checking his reflection in the polished brass of the elevator doors. Exactly, Trey said. I knew that manager was incompetent. You saw how he bowed right. He realized who we were. He probably radioed the owner and said Trey Washington is in the building and he is unhappy. That is why we are going up. This is damage control. The CEO probably wants to offer me a discount on the buy-in for the inconvenience. I stood silently next to Dante, listening to my brother rewrite reality in real time. It was fascinating in a morbid way. His brain could not process the idea that I was the one in charge, so it invented a scenario where he was the victim and the hero simultaneously. He truly believed that a billionaire was waiting upstairs to apologize to him for his lack of funds. The elevator doors slid open, revealing a cabin that was larger than my first apartment. It was lined with hand-stitched Italian leather, and the floor was covered in a thick, plush carpet that swallowed the sound of our footsteps. There were no buttons inside, just a single card reader. I stepped in first, followed by Dante. My family hesitated for a second, intimidated by the sheer luxury of the transport, but their greed pushed them forward. Tiffany stepped inside and immediately let out a gasp. She ran her hand along the wall, her fingers trailing over the leather. "Oh my God," she whispered. "This is insane. Feel this, Trey. It is so soft." She turned to me, a smirk playing on her lips. "Wow, Zoe," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "This elevator is nicer than your entire house. Seriously, the carpet in here is worth more than that rag you have in your living room. You should take notes. This is what real wealth looks like, not that dusty old furniture you got from Grandma." I looked at her. I looked at the way she coveted the walls, the way she looked at the ceiling as if she wanted to peel the gold leaf off and put it in her purse. "It is nice, isn't it?" I said, my voice neutral. "It was designed to be comfortable. The ride to the top takes a while." Trey leaned against the back wall, putting his hands in his pockets, trying to look casual. "Yeah, well, get used to it," he said. "Once I sign this deal with Onyx, I will be riding in things like this every day. I might even get a private elevator installed in the brownstone. You know, once we renovate it and get rid of all that junk." Marcus nodded approvingly. "Good thinking, son. That house needs to be modernized. We need to gut it. Tear down those old walls. Open up the floor plan. Make it fit for a man of your stature." I felt Dante's hand tighten around mine. He knew how much I loved the original architecture of Grandma's house. He knew that hearing them talk about gutting it was like hearing them talk about desecrating a grave, but I squeezed his hand back, a silent signal to wait. The elevator began to rise. It was smooth, almost weightless. We watched the floor numbers tick upward on the digital display. 20, 30, 40. As the numbers climbed, so did their confidence. "You know," Dad, Trey said, looking at the display, "I bet the CEO is going to offer us a drink. Probably something better than that wine. Maybe a rare scotch. You should do the talking at first, but let me handle the numbers. I want him to know I am sharp." Marcus straightened his tie. "Of course. I will make the introductions. I will tell him about our family history, about our standing in the community. It is important to establish pedigree." I closed my eyes for a second, letting the hum of the elevator vibrate through the soles of my shoes. They were planning their pitch. They were rehearsing their lies. They had absolutely no idea that the person they wanted to impress was standing 2 feet away, listening to every word. The elevator slowed as we reached the 42nd floor. The display flashed simply, "Penthouse." "Get ready, everyone," Marcus said, clapping his hands together. "Game faces. Remember, we belong here." The doors slid open with a soft chime. We stepped out into a hallway that was dim and cool, lit by recessed floor lights that cast long, dramatic shadows. The air smelled of white tea and cedar, the signature scent of the Onyx brand. At the end of the hallway was a set of massive double doors made of frosted glass and steel. There was no receptionist, no security guard, just the silent, imposing entrance to the inner sanctum. Tiffany shivered, hugging her arms around herself. "It is quiet," she whispered. "Too quiet." "Where are the employees?" "The CEO prefers privacy at night," Dante said, his voice echoing slightly in the corridor. He led the way, walking with the confidence of a man who had walked this hall 1,000 times. Trey hurried to catch up his footsteps, heavy and clumsy compared to Dante's measured stride. "So is he in there?" Trey asked, pointing to the doors. "Is he waiting for us?" "He is waiting," Dante confirmed. We reached the doors. They were 12 feet tall, imposing and impenetrable to those who did not belong. But for me, they were just the doors to my office. Dante stepped to the side, allowing me to stand front and center. Marcus frowned. "Zoe, move out of the way. I should lead." I did not move. I reached out and placed my palm on the biometric scanner panel on the wall. A soft blue light scanned my hand. "Access." Granted, a computerized voice announced softly. Marcus and Trey froze. "How did you do that?" Trey asked, his eyes wide. "Why does it know your hand?" "Maybe the system is broken like the card machine," Tiffany suggested nervously. "Or maybe it is just a motion sensor." "Yeah, that is it. It is just a motion sensor." I pushed the doors open. They swung inward, revealing the boardroom. It was exactly as I had left it, but the lighting had changed. The city lights outside were now the primary illumination, casting the room in shades of electric blue and deep purple. The obsidian table gleamed in the center. But it was not the view that stopped them. Hanging on the far wall directly behind the empty CEO's chair was a massive portrait. It was 5 feet tall and painted in oil. It was not a picture of a random landscape. It was not a picture of an old white man in a suit. It was a painting of an elderly black woman with silver hair sitting in a garden, holding a single yellow rose. Her eyes were warm but piercing, painted with such skill that they seemed to follow you wherever you moved in the room. Marcus stopped dead in his tracks. His breath hitched in his throat, a ragged gasping sound. He knew that face. He had spent his childhood fearing and respecting that face. He had spent the last 10 years trying to forget that face. "Mama?" he whispered. Trey stumbled back, bumping into Tiffany. That is Grandma," he stammered. "Why is there a painting of Grandma in the CEO's office?" Tiffany looked from the painting to me, then back to the painting. She looked confused, her brain trying to connect dots that were too far apart for her limited imagination. "Is this some kind of shrine?" she asked. "Did the CEO know her? Did she work here? Was she the cleaning lady or something?" I walked into the room. The sound of my heels on the marble floor was sharp and authoritative. I walked past the stunned statues of my family. I walked past the obsidian table. I walked all the way to the end of the room until I was standing directly beneath the portrait. I turned around to face them. Under the gaze of my grandmother and under the weight of my own silence, I watched them crumble. "She was not the cleaning lady, Tiffany," I said, my voice projecting clearly across the room. "She was the inspiration." Marcus took a step forward, his hand trembling as he pointed at the painting. "Zoe," he choked out. "What is this? What is going on? Why is my mother's picture here?" I rested my hand on the back of the CEO's chair. The leather was cool to the touch. "Because she is the only reason this company exists," I said. "She believed in me when you did not. She gave me the seed money you thought I wasted. And she taught me that a house is not just an asset to be sold, Dad. It is a foundation." I pulled the chair out. The sound was loud in the silence. I sat down. And then I did something I had not done in 6 years. I looked at my father, not as a daughter seeking approval, but as a judge delivering a verdict. "Welcome to the Onyx Collection," I said, spreading my arms wide. "I believe you wanted to speak to the manager about a declined credit card." Trey's knees gave out. He actually collapsed into one of the guest chairs, his mouth opening and closing like a fish on dry land. The delusion was dead. The reality was staring him in the face, and it was wearing a turtleneck and sitting in a chair worth more than his car. "The CEO is listening," I said, leaning back. "Go ahead, Trey. Pitch me." My father watched me standing by the chair at the head of the table, and his confusion quickly morphed into irritation. In his mind, I was suffering from a delusions of grandeur. He truly believed that the stress of the evening had caused me to snap, and that I was now embarrassing him in front of an empty room. He walked toward me, his hand outstretched, intending to guide me away from the seat of power, as if I were a wayward child who had wandered onto a stage during a performance. "Zoe, get away from there," Marcus hissed, his eyes darting to the double doors, expecting the real CEO to burst in at any moment. "That is the chairman's seat. You cannot just sit there. It is disrespectful. When he walks in and sees you lounging in his chair, he will cancel the deal before we even start. Move. Now." He reached for the back of the chair, intending to pull it away from me. He wanted to sit there himself. It was instinct for him. Marcus Washington always sat at the head of the table. It was the only place he felt he existed. But before his hand could touch the leather, Dante stepped in. He moved with a speed that belied his size, a wall of muscle and resolve, interposing himself between my father and the chair. He did not shove Marcus, but he occupied the space so completely that my father had to stop or run into him. "Excuse me, Marcus." Dante said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the silent room. "But that seat is taken." Marcus looked up at Dante, his face flushing with renewed anger. "Get out of my way, you insolent laborer," Marcus spat. "This is a boardroom, not a construction site. You have no authority here." Dante looked down at him. He did not blink. "I have the authority of the architect who built this room," Dante said calmly. "And I am telling you that seat is not for you. It never was." While they locked eyes, I moved. I did not ask for permission. I did not hesitate. I stepped around them and moved to the chair. It was a high-backed executive model, upholstered in black Italian leather, the same leather Tiffany had been fawning over in the elevator. I sat down. The chair accepted me. It was adjusted to my height, my weight, and my posture because it was mine. I placed my arms on the obsidian armrests. I leaned back, crossing my legs. I looked out the floor-to-ceiling window for a brief second, catching the reflection of the city lights dancing on the glass, and then I swiveled slowly to face my family. Trey was standing by the guest chairs, looking horrified. "Zoe, get up," he squeaked, his voice cracking. "Are you crazy? You are going to ruin everything. The CEO is going to walk in and see the receptionist sitting in his throne. Get up." I looked at Trey. I looked at the sweat on his forehead. I looked at the cheap suit he thought made him a businessman. "Sit down, Trey," I said. The command was soft, but it carried the weight of the entire building. It bounced off the glass walls and hit him in the chest. Trey blinked. "What?" I said, "Sit down." I repeated, my voice dropping an octave. "All of you, sit." There was something in my tone, something ancient and undeniable that made them obey. It was the voice of the woman in the portrait behind me. It was the voice of a matriarch. Trey sank into a chair. Tiffany sat down next to him, clutching her bag. Marcus stood for a moment longer, defying gravity and reality, before he too slowly lowered himself into the chair to my right. They sat there staring at me, waiting for the punchline. They were waiting for me to laugh and say I was joking. They were waiting for the real owner to come in and arrest me. I reached into my oversized tote bag. I bypassed the clutch where the black card was hidden. I reached for a thick, glossy document and a magazine I had picked up from the newsstand in the lobby earlier that day. I tossed the magazine onto the center of the obsidian table. It spun slowly across the smooth black stone, making a hissing sound, before coming to a stop directly in front of my father. It was the latest issue of Forbes. The cover feature was about self-made minority billionaires, and staring back at them from the cover wearing a white power suit and standing on the balcony of this very penthouse was me. The headline was bold and uncompromising. "The Silent Titan, How Zoe Washington Built the Onyx Collection from Scratch." Marcus looked at the magazine. He looked at the face on the cover. Then he looked at my face. He looked back down. His brain was misfiring. He was trying to reconcile the two images. The daughter he thought was a failure, and the woman the world called a titan. "Read the caption, Dad," I said. Marcus reached out with a trembling hand. He did not pick up the magazine. He just touched the edge of it as if testing to see if it was a hologram. Zoe Washington, CEO and founder. He read, his voice barely a whisper. Estimated net worth $780 million. He looked up. His eyes were wide, filled with a terror I had never seen before. It was the terror of a man realizing he had been walking on a frozen lake that had already cracked. I then tossed the second document onto the table. It was the corporate registration for the hotel. It listed the officers of the company. President Zoe Washington. Lead architect Dante Reynolds. Tiffany gasped. She grabbed Trey's arm, digging her nails in so hard I saw him wince. Reynolds, she hissed. You said his name was Reynolds. Trey was not listening. He was staring at the Forbes cover, his mouth hanging open. This is fake, Trey stammered. This is a prank. You printed this. You went to a copy shop and printed a fake magazine cover. It is a joke. It has to be. Because if it is real, I cut in. Leaning forward, my eyes locking onto his, then you just tried to sell my own house to invest in a scam that pretends to be my company. I stood up. I placed my hands flat on the table. There is no man in Dubai, Trey. There is no broker named Chad. There is no secret silent partner program. There is only me. I walked slowly around the table. I am the one who approved the design for this building. I am the one who chose the marble under your feet. I am the one who decided that the janitorial closet on the 4th floor would stay a janitorial closet because, unlike you, I respect the people who clean up the messes others leave behind. I stopped behind Marcus. He did not turn around. He was frozen, staring at the magazine. And I am the one, I whispered, leaning down to his ear, who just paid your $8,000 dinner bill. Marcus flinched as if I had burned him. I walked back to the head of the table and stood in front of my grandmother's portrait. Welcome to the Onyx Collection, I said, my voice ringing with finality. I am Zoe Washington. I am the CEO. I am the founder. And this hotel, this empire, and the very air you are breathing right now belongs to me. The silence that followed was not empty. It was heavy. It was suffocating. It was the sound of 3 egos dying simultaneously. I watched the blood drain from Tiffany's face. She looked at the carpet she had admired, the carpet she said was worth more than my life, and she looked like she wanted to vomit. She realized that every insult, every snide remark about my clothes and my husband had been spoken to the woman who could buy and sell her entire existence before breakfast. I watched Trey. He looked small. He looked like a child who had been caught stealing from the cookie jar, only to realize the jar belonged to the police chief. The arrogance was gone. The bluster was gone. All that was left was the hollow shell of a man who had never achieved anything on his own. And Marcus, my father. He slowly reached into his pocket. He pulled out the blank check. The check I had told him to fill out. The check he had kept as a down payment on his love. He looked at it. Then he looked at me. His face was gray. Not pale, but gray. The color of ash. The color of a man who realizes he just sold a diamond for the price of a piece of glass. Zoe, he croaked, his voice unrecognizable. You own all of this. Yes, Dad, I said. And Dante. I continued gesturing to my husband, who was standing by the window, looking like the king he was. Dante is not a laborer. He is the genius who built it. He owns 40% of the company. Tiffany let out a small whimper. She looked at Dante's boots, the boots she had mocked. She realized that the dust on them was the dust of an empire being built. So I said, sitting back down in my chair and crossing my arms, now that we have established who is sitting at the head of the table, let us talk about that apology. I looked at Marcus. You have a check in your hand, Dad, and you have a choice. You can keep it. You can fill it out for whatever amount you think you can get away with and walk out that door. But if you do, you never speak to me again. Or I said, my voice dropping to a whisper, You can tear it up. You can apologize to my husband. And maybe, just maybe, I won't have security throw you out of my building. Marcus looked at the check. He looked at the billions of dollars surrounding him. He looked at the daughter he had underestimated his entire life. The room was so quiet I could hear the hum of the city 40 stories below. The payoff was here, and it tasted sweeter than any wine they could have ordered. The silence that filled the penthouse was the kind that usually follows a bomb blast. Trey was slumped in his chair looking at the Forbes magazine as if it were a warrant for his execution. The reality of his situation was settling in like concrete hardening around his feet. He had lost the family house. He had lost his dignity. And he was slowly realizing he had lost his freedom. I leaned forward on the obsidian table, clasping my hands together. I looked at my brother not with hate, but with a cold, clinical pity. He was a product of my father's ego, a spoiled fruit that had rotted on the vine. "Let us talk about your portfolio, Trey," I said, my voice cutting through the quiet. "You mentioned earlier that your funds were locked in a holding account. That was a lie. But the part about your money being gone, that is true." Trey looked up, his eyes red and watery. I can get it back," he stammered. "The broker, Chad. He said it was just a temporary freeze." "There is no Chad," I said simply. "The brokerage firm you wired your money to is a shell company based in the Cayman Islands. It was flagged by my security team 3 months ago. We track anyone who tries to use the Onyx name for fraud. We knew about this scam. We just did not know my own brother would be stupid enough to fall for it." Trey's face crumbled. He grabbed his hair, pulling at the roots. "It is gone," he whispered. "All of it. The 200,000. It was everything. It was the mortgage money. It was the car loans." I nodded. "Yes, it is gone. And because you used high-interest predatory lenders to leverage that initial cash, you now owe close to $250,000 to people who do not care about your last name. They only care about their money. And they were preparing to seize your assets tomorrow morning." Trey looked at Marcus. "Dad, help me. You have to help me." Marcus stayed silent. He was clutching the blank check in his pocket, his eyes fixed on the floor. He knew he could not save this. But I continued, drawing Trey's attention back to me. I decided to intervene. "Not because I care about you, Trey, but because I do not want creditors harassing my family. So this morning, before I came to dinner, I bought your debt." Trey blinked. "You what?" "I bought the note," I said. "I paid off the lenders. Every single cent. You do not owe the bank anymore. You do not owe the loan sharks." A look of immense relief washed over Trey's face. He let out a breathless laugh, forcing a smile. "Oh, thank God. Thank you, Zoe. I knew you would not let me drown. I knew we were still family. I promise I will pay you back. I will find a new job. I will." I held up a hand, stopping him mid-sentence. "You misunderstand," I said. "I did not pay it off to forgive it. I paid it off to acquire it. I am your creditor now, Trey. You owe me $250,000. And unlike the bank, I do not accept excuses." Trey's smile vanished. "What? What do you mean?" "I mean you are going to work it off," I said. "Starting tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. Trey laughed nervously, looking around for support. "Work it off? Like, come work for you?" "In the office. I can do that. I can be a manager. I can help with marketing." I shook my head slowly. "No. You are not qualified to manage a lemonade stand, let alone a department in my company. You have no skills. You have no work ethic. And you have an ego that needs to be surgically removed." I pressed a button on the intercom console on the table. "Mr. Henderson, please bring the contract." The double doors opened and Mr. Henderson walked in carrying a clipboard and a gray bundle of fabric. He placed them in front of Trey. Trey looked at the bundle. He unfolded it. It was a jumpsuit. A gray industrial jumpsuit with the name Trey stitched on the pocket. What is this? Trey whispered. That is your uniform, I said. We have a vacancy in the custodial department, specifically in the sub-basement level. The grease traps in the kitchens need to be cleaned daily, the laundry chutes need to be unclogged, and the employee restrooms need to be scrubbed. Trey recoiled as if the fabric was radioactive. You are joking, he said, his voice rising in panic. You want me to be a janitor? Me? A Washington. I am not scrubbing toilets, Zoe. I am not wearing this. Then you go to jail, I said, leaning back. It is a simple choice. I have the fraud documents. I have the proof of your wire transfers. I can hand this file to the FBI right now, and you will spend the next 5 years in a federal prison for wire fraud and embezzlement. Or you can put on that jumpsuit, go down to the basement, and work for minimum wage until every single penny of that $250,000 is repaid. I did the math for you, I added. At your current rate of pay, it should take you about 12 years, assuming you do not get fired for incompetence. Trey looked at Marcus. Dad, tell her she cannot do this. Tell her it is slavery. Marcus finally looked up. He looked at his son, the golden child who had turned out to be fool's gold. She owns the debt, Trey, Marcus said, his voice hollow. She owns you. Do the job. It is better than prison. Trey slumped forward, burying his face in the gray jumpsuit, sobbing uncontrollably. The sound of his weeping filled the room, a pathetic soundtrack to his downfall. Mr. Henderson stepped forward and gently but firmly placed a hand on Trey's shoulder. Come with me, Mr. Washington, Henderson said. Your shift starts in 6 hours. We need to get you fitted for non-slip shoes. Trey stood up, legs shaking, and let himself be led away. He did not look back. He walked out of the penthouse and into a life of hard labor, a life he had spent his entire existence looking down on. As the doors closed behind him, I turned my attention to Tiffany. She was sitting very still, clutching her fake Louis Vuitton bag so tight her knuckles were white. She had watched her husband be destroyed, and she had not said a word to defend him. She was calculating, trying to find an angle, trying to find a way to survive the shipwreck. When our eyes met, she forced a smile. It was a terrifying grimace of fear and false charm. Zoe, she said, her voice high and breathless. Wow, that was tough love, right? But he needed it. Honestly, I have been telling him for years to get a real job. I had no idea he was stealing money. If I had known, I would have told you immediately. You know that, right? I watched her pivoting. She was ready to throw Trey under the bus to save her own skin. We are sisters, Zoe. Tiffany continued, standing up and smoothing her skirt. I know we have had our differences. I know I made some comments earlier that were insensitive. And I apologize. I was stressed. But now that Trey is, well, occupied, maybe we can start over. I have some great ideas for rebranding the hotel spa. I have a degree in fashion marketing, remember? I could be a great asset to your team. I laughed. It was a genuine laugh of disbelief. An asset, I repeated. Tiffany, you are a liability. You are a cancer. You sat at my table and insulted my husband. You insulted my race. You insulted my family. And now you think you can just switch sides because the power dynamic has shifted. I stood up and walked around the table until I was standing right in front of her. You are not family, I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. You are a parasite. And I am the cure. I snapped my fingers. 2 large security guards who had been waiting in the hallway stepped into the room. They were not smiling. Tiffany's eyes darted between them and me. What is going on? She asked, her voice trembling. Zoe, what are you doing? I picked up a tablet from the table and tapped the screen. I am enacting a global ban, I said, showing her the screen. This is your profile. It has just been uploaded to the security servers of every single Onyx property in the world. From Chicago to Tokyo, from Paris to Dubai. Your face is now flagged. If you step foot within 100 feet of any building I own, the police will be called immediately for trespassing. Tiffany gasped. You cannot do that. I have a spa appointment next week at the downtown location. Not anymore, I said. Your membership is revoked. Your husband is scrubbing floors in the basement, and you are going to leave. Right now. I nodded to the guards. They stepped forward, grabbing Tiffany by the arms. They did not handle her gently. They handled her like the intruder she was. Get your hands off me! Tiffany shrieked, thrashing against their grip. Do you know who I am? I am a Washington. Zoe, tell them to stop. This is assault. My bag. You are crushing my bag. You are not a Washington, I said calmly. You are just a woman who married the wrong brother. They dragged her toward the doors. Her heels skidded across the marble floor, leaving black scuff marks that Trey would probably have to buff out later. I will sue you! Tiffany screamed, her voice echoing down the hallway. I will sue you for everything you have. You are a monster. You are jealous because I am beautiful, and you are just a... The heavy doors slammed shut, cutting off her scream. The silence returned instant and absolute. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of white tea and cedar. The air felt cleaner already. I turned back to the room. Dante was standing by the window watching the scene with a solemn expression. He gave me a nod that said, "You did what had to be done." And then there was Marcus. He was the last one left. He sat alone at the long obsidian table surrounded by empty chairs. He looked small. He looked old. The swagger was gone. The patriarchal power was gone. He was just a man with a check in his pocket and a lifetime of regrets sitting on his shoulders. I walked back to the head of the table. I did not sit down. I stood there looking down at him. The execution was almost complete. But the final sentence had to be delivered by the judge herself. The heavy double doors clicked shut, sealing away the screams of my sister-in-law and the pathetic sobbing of my brother. The room was suddenly vast and quiet, returning to the sanctuary it was designed to be. The only sound was the low hum of the ventilation system and the ragged breathing of the man sitting to my right. Marcus Washington sat alone. The army he had brought to conquer me had been decimated. His golden child was in the basement scrubbing grease traps. His ally was being escorted off the premises by security. He was a general without soldiers, sitting in the enemy's throne room, realizing too late that the enemy was his own flesh and blood. He looked at the blank check still clutched in his hand. Then he looked at the magazine on the table. Then he looked at me. I watched the gears in his mind turning. I watched him try to salvage the wreckage. He smoothed his tie, a nervous habit I had watched for 30 years. He cleared his throat, trying to summon the voice of authority that had cowed me for so long. But when he spoke, it was weak and wavering. Zoe, he began, his voice cracking slightly. That was impressive. I have to admit, I did not see this coming. The way you handled Trey, the way you commanded the room. He stood up slowly, his knees popping. He walked toward me, a hesitant smile plastering itself onto his face. It was the smile of a salesman who knows he has lost the sale, but is trying to keep the customer in the store. You know, he continued, gaining a little more confidence with every step. I was hard on you tonight. I was. But you have to understand, a father knows his children. I pushed you, Zoe. I pushed you because I knew you had this in you. I knew if I made life too easy for you, you would never develop this kind of strength. He reached out as if to touch my shoulder. I am proud of you, he said. I am so incredibly proud. Look at this empire you built. You are a true Washington. You have my business acumen. You have my fire. I took a step back, moving out of his reach. The rejection was physical and immediate. Stop, I said. Marcus froze, his hand hovering in midair. Do not do that, I said, my voice low and devoid of emotion. Do not rewrite history to make yourself the hero of my success. You did not push me to greatness, Dad. You pushed me away. Marcus lowered his hand, his smile faltering. Zoe, come on, we are family. Families fight. But in the end, we stick together. Now that I know the truth, now that I see what you have accomplished, we can really do something special. Imagine the partnership. With your capital and my connections? I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. Your connections, I repeated. You mean the connections that got you a table at a restaurant you could not afford? You mean the connections that led your son into a Ponzi scheme? I walked over to the obsidian table. I picked up the small leather folder that held the receipt for the dinner. The dinner he had begged me to pay for. I turned back to him. You are not proud of me, Marcus, I said, using his first name. It felt strange on my tongue, but it felt right. You are not standing there looking at me with love. You are looking at me and seeing a bank account. You are seeing a bailout for your bad decisions. You are seeing a way to restore the reputation you destroyed. Marcus's face hardened. That is not fair. I am your father. Are you? I asked. Because 10 minutes ago when you thought I was a receptionist, you told me I was useless. You told me I was a crab in a bucket. You told me that if I did not sign over Grandma's house, I was dead to you. I walked closer to him, holding his gaze. I remember your exact words, I whispered. You said you would erase me from the family tree. You said you would burn my photos. You said as far as you were concerned, you only had one child. Marcus swallowed hard. I was angry. I did not mean it. But I did, I said. I took his hand. He looked surprised, thinking I was offering a truce. I placed the black leather folder in his palm and closed his fingers around it. I accept your terms, I said. You gave me a choice. Option 1 was to buy your love. Option 2 was to leave. I stepped back. I am choosing option 2. Marcus looked down at the folder in his hand. Zoe, you cannot be serious. You have everything now. You have the money. You have the power. Why hold a grudge? We can be a powerful family. I looked at the painting of my grandmother, the woman who had actually loved me. I already have a powerful family, I said. I looked at Dante. He stepped forward, standing beside me, his presence solid and unwavering. This is my family, I said. And you, Marcus, you are just a guest who overstayed his welcome. I pointed to the receipt in his hand. That is the receipt for the dinner, I said. It is paid in full. Consider it a severance package. It is the last meal you will ever get from me. It is the last dollar you will ever see from this company. Marcus stared at me, his eyes searching for a crack in the armor, searching for the little girl who needed him. But she was gone. From this moment on, I said, my voice final and absolute, we are strangers. If you need to contact me, you can speak to my legal department. But do not call my personal number. Do not come to my house. And do not ever claim that you built this. I gestured to the room, to the city, to the life I had created. I built this, I said, in spite of you, not because of you. Marcus stood there for a long moment. He looked at the check in his pocket, the one he could not cash. He looked at the receipt in his hand, the proof of his failure. He looked at Dante, who stared back with a protective glare. And finally he looked at me. He opened his mouth to speak, to argue, to beg, but something in my eyes told him it was over. The bridge was not just burned, it was disintegrated. He slumped his shoulders. He looked aged by 10 years in 10 seconds. He turned around slowly, shuffling his feet on the expensive marble floor. He walked toward the elevator alone. The silence of the room swallowed him up. He pressed the button. The doors opened. He stepped inside. He did not look back. He could not bear to see what he had thrown away. The doors slid shut, cutting him out of my life forever. I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding since I was 6 years old. The tension in my shoulders evaporated. The air in the room felt lighter, cleaner, sweeter. Dante turned to me. He did not say a word. He just opened his arms. I stepped into them, burying my face in his chest. I smelled the cedar and the sawdust, and the scent of unconditional love. He wrapped his arms around me, holding me tight, anchoring me to the earth. It is over, he whispered into my hair. You did it. I pulled back, looking up at him. Tears streamed down my face, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of relief. We did it, I corrected him. We walked to the window together. We looked out at the lights of Chicago spread out below us like a sea of stars. We saw the traffic moving, the city breathing, the world continuing to turn. Somewhere down there, my brother was learning the value of hard work. Somewhere down there, my sister-in-law was learning the consequences of cruelty. And somewhere down there, my father was learning the meaning of loss. But up here in the sky, there was only peace. I rested my head on Dante's shoulder, watching the reflection of my grandmother's portrait in the glass. She seemed to be smiling. I had lost the family I was born into, but I had saved the one I had chosen. And looking at the horizon, I knew that was a trade I would make 1,000 times over. The past was a closed tab. The future was open for business. And for the first time in my life, I was truly free. This journey taught me that sharing DNA does not grant anyone a lifetime pass to disrespect you. For years, I begged for a seat at a table where I was viewed only as a financial asset, never as a daughter. The hardest lesson was accepting that my father's love was transactional, while my husband's love was unconditional. True family isn't defined by bloodlines or last names. It is defined by who holds your hand in the hospital and who stands by you when the world crumbles. Walking away wasn't an act of cruelty. It was the ultimate act of self-love.